What conditions has hydrogen, inhalation, molecular hydrogen through water, what conditions has this been studied for?
There's around 3,000 publications so far, over 200 human studies, Parkinson's disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, stroke, cancer, obviously, Alzheimer's, dementia.
You gave hydrogen water to people for 6 months, and they saw improvements in multiple markers that give us an indication of metabolic syndrome.
We found that the subjects drinking hydrogen water had improved glucose levels. In fact, there was even a loss of weight, improved BMI. Hydrogen is very different because it actually does not have the physical chemical property to neutralize these other free radicals. Hydrogen can only react or only neutralize the most toxic free radicals.
It almost feels divine, and it's like a divine molecule. It's wild.
God did make the world with a word. That word would be hydrogen.
On this week's podcast, I talked to Dr. Tyler LeBaron. He's probably one of the world's leading experts on hydrogen. We go into hydrogen water, inhaled hydrogen. We go into structured water, alkaline water. Are these real? Are they a scam? We talk about how much to dose the water, the protocols. We talk about the benefits, what it's actually doing in your body. I'm not really a biohacker. I just prefer to go out in the ocean, go barefoot and surf, but I've gotten really interested in this recently, and some of the research is pretty impressive. So I think you guys are really gonna find this one interesting. If you're skeptical of hydrogen water, I think you may be changed in your mind at the end of this podcast, so stick with this one. It's very technical, but I tried to break down the parts that are more technical during the podcast. If you have questions, put them below in the comments. My team will try and answer them, or I can answer them on YouTube or wherever you're watching this podcast. We're gonna try and put stuff on the screen to make the technical things more digestible, but this podcast is worth your time. Enjoy this podcast with Tyler LeBaron. Dr. Tyler LeBaron.
All right.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Is there a PhD in molecular hydrogen? What is your PhD in?
Well, okay, so my PhD is in physiology, and I did my dissertation on cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, where we used molecular hydrogen as one of the modalities for treatment modalities. So it's not like a PhD in hydrogen like that. Doesn't quite make sense.
Dissertation on hydrogen.
Yeah, and my master's, we also studied a hydrogen gas. And anyway, it's been a big part of my life since 2009, so you've been 16 years.
For a while.
Yeah.
So I did not know anything about hydrogen before the last year or so, maybe 6 months. I heard your name. My friend Gary Breckus talked about it. I was like, I don't know about this. But I've gotten really interested in this recently. And I don't think of myself as a biohacker. I live in Costa Rica. I walk around barefoot, shirtless, and I'm in the ocean most of the time. So I'm doing like biohacking in nature. But some of these things are coming on my radar recently, hyperbaric chambers, hydrogen. And the more I dug into hydrogen, I think one of my friends gave me your contact information. We've been talking for months now. When I started looking at the research, I was like, this is really fascinating. And we're going to get into a lot of that in the podcast. We were talking before the podcast that this is an interesting topic because it really gets to like general chemistry, right? When I was in medical school, I was learning about oxidation and reduction. And the acronym that I learned was Leo the lion says Gur. Loss of electrons is oxidation, gain of electrons is reduction. And over time in PA school, in cardiology, in medical school, in residency, doing this work, I realized like so much of life is the movement of electrons.
Yeah.
This is so crazy. And that's what we're talking about with hydrogen. And it relates to oxidative stress, reactive oxygen species, free radicals, inflammation, things people have heard about. But we can really use this conversation about hydrogen to get into some of that like deep dive, like chemistry. So I think from the outset, I want to give people a context here so they know why we're talking about this. And then I want to circle back to the chemistry.
Yeah.
What conditions has hydrogen, inhalation, molecular hydrogen through water? What conditions has this been studied for? And broad strokes, what have we seen?
Okay, excellent. So we still have a long way to go, but there are a growing number of publications. There's around 3,000 publications so far, over 200 human studies, and looking at hydrogen on the use of, there's probably over 200 different human and animal disease models for which hydrogen has been studied.
Wow.
So we look at things like Parkinson's disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, stroke, cancer, obviously, Alzheimer's, dementia. The top diseases that there are, hydrogen has been studied in different models and human studies and so on, and showing some pretty interesting promise.
Wow, when I was reading, you sent me a couple of articles. And when I was reading through these articles, I was like, wow, like everything that most of us suffer from, all the chronic diseases, cancer, cognitive impairment, dementia models, Parkinson's, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. Okay, so what's going on here? This is an incredible thing. And you sent me a study, maybe we can just start with that one, that I think you were the first author on the study where they gave hydrogen water to people with metabolic dysfunction, right? Mm-hmm. Just what's the conclude? Like, tell me about this.
Yeah, just in a nutshell. Yeah. Just in a nutshell.
It's a 24-week study.
Yeah, it's 24 weeks. Yeah, 6 months, and they had 60 subjects, and basically we just gave the placebo group just had normal water, and then the hydrogen water group, and all it did is drink water. Right, there's just this pretty simple intervention with hydrogen, right? With hydrogen gas, which we need to go into the chemistry of what we're talking about a little bit. But in the end, after drinking the water, we found that the subjects drinking hydrogen water had improved glucose levels. So like, some had pretty high glucose levels, like pre-diabetic, their glucose levels decreased, improved HbA1c marker, decreased inflammation markers, decreased oxidative stress, improved cholesterol levels. In fact, there was even fat loss, just a loss of weight, improved BMI, just by drinking. And that's the next number of studies. A meta-analysis also showing that hydrogen helps improve lipid profiles, again, just by drinking hydrogen water.
That's so interesting. Okay, so I want to get into it. I almost forgot this, but we got to do this. I got gifts for you.
Oh, so wow.
I got you some whole package from Heart and Soil.
Okay.
That has testicle in it. That's our Heart and Soil testicle pills. And then Lineage is another company that I have. We have grass-fed meat sticks, and you are the first person to see this. We have the new spicy Southwest flavor and the garlic and onion flavors. I put them all into a little package here for you. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you can take these home. Let me know what you think of these.
Yeah.
But it's like, I think it all goes together, right? This idea that if you eat healthy, you avoid these chronic illnesses, and some of us develop chronic illnesses. How do we get back? We get back by eating healthy, but I think that all of us are aging. There's another longevity angle with hydrogen that we'll get into. But what's up, guys? The studio messed up this video. So for the next 20 minutes, there's no video. We've got audio, which we're going to continue on the video here. But if you want to skip and you just want to watch video, you don't want to listen to Tyler and I talking, fast forward 20 minutes. We've got video for the rest of the podcast. Sorry for this. It was a studio error. This stuff happens with podcasting. If you like the audio, you can just keep watching the audio. We'll put a still frame. But if you want to keep watching the video, fast forward to 20 minutes. Hope you guys keep enjoying this podcast. This is Paul from Montana. I mean, human health to me is good quality food, but we're all aging. And so this is why hydrogen is interesting to me. Yeah. Like, how do we get the edge? Once we become sick, we can use things like this to potentially reverse it. And then I think there's also applications. I mean, the internet doesn't know this, but I was hanging out with Brian Johnson, Brian with a Y Johnson, the guy, the Don't Die guy. And we were sort of talking about his philosophy. And, he shows me like his hyperbaric chamber and his garage. And I'm like, so he's interested in hyperbarics. And I need to get him on the hydrogen train. I think he'll be interested to hear about this too. And he and I differ. He's vegan. I'm still trying to convince him to eat meat. But we'll see where that goes. But let's talk about, I think that people are interested in hyperbarics and hydrogen, which are actually kind of connected. And we all want to live better. We want to live longer, or we want to get back to health, or we want to prolong our health. And so tell me about this study that you sent me, this 24-week study with hydrogen water in people with metabolic dysfunction, because that's common. I mean, 86 to 93% of the population has metabolic dysfunction. So you were giving them hydrogen-rich water. What did you see?
Yeah, exactly. So just a simple study, right? Just a placebo group and then the hydrogen-rich water group. And those who are drinking hydrogen-rich water, we saw improvements in their glucose levels, improvements in the HbA1c as well, decreased markers of inflammation and oxidative stress. Pretty much all the biomarkers that you start seeing changes and just these improvements. In fact, it was a little bit surprising, but we also saw those drinking hydrogen water, they lost weight and the fat mass. And you can see that by their weight and their BMI. And this is actually done in multiple different studies where just drinking hydrogen water seemed to help help them lose weight. Wow. Just on a side tangent, there is potentially a mechanism. There was an animal study published in the Journal of Obesity where hydrogen increased the secretion of the hepatic growth factor FGF21, fibroblast growth factor 21, and this increases energy expenditure. And in this study, they used leptin-deficient mice, and the rats that drank hydrogen water, or rodents that drank hydrogen water, they prevented the weight gain substantially compared to the ones who did not drink hydrogen water, and it was equivalent to about a 20% caloric deficit, just the drinking hydrogen water, right? So when we're seeing some of these translational effects into human studies, that's when it starts getting really interesting.
How much weight do people lose over 6 months?
I think in this case, I want to say it was like more than a kilogram. You know, so it's, yeah.
But it was statistically significant.
Yeah. Is that, yeah. Well, yeah, it was still, yeah. And this one was statistically significant. But in general, when you look at all those studies, you tend to find this trend of fat loss and increase in lean muscle mass. Or not lean muscle, just lean body mass, I should say.
Right.
There's a little bit of difference.
I mean, I guess it makes sense. If you're improving metabolic health, a lot of things could get better overall. So this is what's wild to me. Like you said, I mean, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or at least cognitive impairment, metabolic dysfunction, cancer. These are the diseases that most of us suffer from. And we're talking about a gaseous molecule that has been around on the surface of the earth since our inception.
Yeah, so literally since the beginning.
Right. So let's just, with that context, so people understand how important this conversation is, the potential to help improve every aspect of human health with hundreds of human studies and thousands of overall studies, but still a new molecule that we're studying. Like, let's back up and talk about the general chemistry about how this is working. So hydrogen, I mean, you are probably one of the best people on the planet to talk about this, but like, what's going on here? Because when I first heard about hydrogen, I'm thinking, okay, if it's getting rid of some reactive species, whether they're reactive oxygen species or reactive nitrogen species or other reactive species, that's great. But how does it know? I mean, so like just let's do basic general chemistry to start. What is oxidation? What is reduction? What is hydrogen doing? And I know it has kind of two different
yes.
Yeah, too. So
I love it. Okay, and maybe to go back even further, when we talk about hydrogen, we see hydrogen on the periodic table of element. That's the first one. That's the first one. That's hydrogen. Now this hydrogen, because people get confused about what hydrogen water is, right? So we got to follow this chemistry. That's the first hydrogen. Now that hydrogen is just a proton and an electron, and that's called atomic hydrogen, and that's a free radical because it has an unpaired electron. It's not going to stay like that. It wants to react with pretty much anything, and that hydrogen atom can react with other atoms, like it can react with oxygen. And if two hydrogens react with oxygen, you can form water, H2O. Or it can react with carbon to form hydrocarbons, right? Like carbohydrates and fatty acids and all of these things. Or it can react with nitrogen to form ammonia or like amino acids, right? So hydrogen is going to react with pretty much anything. So hydrogen is normally found in compounds. Hydrogen can also react with itself, so two hydrogen atoms reacting with itself to form a molecule of hydrogen, which we call molecular hydrogen.
Okay.
And this is a gas, it's explosive, this is the alternative energy source, right? But you can take this gas and you can inhale it, which we'll talk about, or you can dissolve it into water, as we talked about. When you dissolve hydrogen gas into the water, it doesn't change the chemical structure of the water, or anything. We can talk about the structured water claims of things later, but it doesn't do anything to the water structure. It's just dissolved into the water. The water is the carrier. You can drink the water. The hydrogen gas goes into the body, and it has these effects. And so that's the hydrogen molecule that we're talking about. It doesn't convert to electrons and protons. In other words, it doesn't like change the acid base balance or affect the pH. Okay.
Right.
So now we understand that hydrogen is a neutral molecule. It's two electrons, two protons. So then going to your question, okay, how does this all happen with the redox chemistry, right? And what is going on here? So when we say redox, we're talking about oxidation and reduction.
Right.
And that's how life exists, just like you talked about. It's all about the electrons. And it's like, a battery. You have a negative electrode and a positive electrode, and you have both of them. And there's going to be a separation. That's how you can have a flow of electrons. And the body is the exact same way. You need oxidation and you need reduction. So when we eat food, well, the entire process that drives ATP is oxidation. We literally are inhaling oxygen, and that oxygen is literally stealing the electrons. So when I eat your meat sticks here, right, essentially that oxygen is going to pull the electrons away from that food. And so the audience can understand, it's going to pull those electrons off of those molecules. And in that process, that creates there's a lot of energy, and that energy is going to be converted to make a molecules of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right? That energy currency of our cells. But during that process of electrons going to oxygen, when that happens, you form water inside the mitochondria. So that's called metabolic water. And that's a great thing to happen when you have oxygen just consuming these electrons, reacting with hydrogen ions, and you make water. But sometimes that oxygen will extract electrons at the wrong place in the mitochondria, at the wrong complex. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, you create free radicals. And these free radicals have these unpaired electrons, and they can steal electrons from other things. So now you have your oxidants, right? That's your oxidation that's going on.
Yep. the stealing of electrons. So loss of electrons, oxidation,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
There was an acronym I learned in college. Leo the lion says GER. So LEOGER, loss of electrons. When something loses an electron, it's essentially, that's the process of oxidation. When you gain an electron, it's reduction.
Exactly. Yeah. It's reduction because it like if we talk about like magnesium as an ion, Mg2 plus, if we add electrons, it's no longer a positive 2 charge, it's neutral, right? If you gain more electrons. So it's reduction. It's reduction back to its native state.
Right.
So now we have, oxidation and reduction. And we know that too much free radicals, too many, is bad for you, because that's going to cause oxidative stress,
Right.
and that's going to cause damage to the cell membranes, to the DNA, to the proteins. Radiation causes oxidative damage, and in turn that can cause DNA mutations, and then that can end up causing cancer. And this is so well known. It's been known since at least since the 1950s. We have the free radical theory of aging, which still is talked about a lot, but is largely misunderstood, because that's when I think, to your point, the importance of reduction and the redox homeostasis is really, really important to understand why hydrogen is different than any other antioxidant. Because back in the day, it was all about, oh, these free radicals are bad. These free radicals cause cancer. These free radicals cause every disease, insulin resistance and whatever, and therefore we need to have antioxidants, lots of antioxidants.
As much as possible.
And the more the better,
Yeah.
right? And now we have this billion-dollar industry born of antioxidant marketing. And one of the earlier studies, I remember reading about this, and it was found, this correlation between those who smoked and ate more carrots, they didn't get cancer as often, and they lived better. Well, so logically, we're like, well, duh, like smoking causes free radicals. Carrots have a lot of beta-carotene, vitamin A, so of course you're not going to get it. And then some wise guy in the back of the room was like, maybe we should actually study that. It's like, why should we study something we already know? And so they decided to do a study on it, and lo and behold, they had to stop the study before they even finished it, because those taking the antioxidants, this is not the carrots, this is synthetic antioxidants, those taking the antioxidants were getting cancer and dying faster than those in the placebo. And the same was true with vitamin E and a number.
Smoking.
Exactly, especially when they're smoking.
Yeah. What were they giving in that study? They were giving vitamin E, alpha tocopherol, and then vitamin C.
I think there was several of them, actually. I think there was one with just vitamin E, and then some others where they combined them, and then the one with smoking, that was the first one I remember was beta carotene.
Okay.
So they did a number of them, and all finding the same things, because you're messing with the redox homeostasis of your body.
Right.
So taking these high doses of antioxidants, these synthetic forms, and it's not just the argument, oh, these are synthetic, and because vitamin E has a whole bunch of different stereoisomers of the same thing, and so there's that argument too. But it's actually not just that. These are reductive molecules, and the body actually needs to have a homeostasis between oxidation and reduction, right? And there's actually several principles that I think we should learn from this, and that is that even in these cases, many people were very certain that taking antioxidants are going to be beneficial, because there was a mechanism that was there. But just because there's a mechanism doesn't mean there's going to be the primary outcome.
Right.
And that's why we have to really focus on, what does the clinical research show? And so we'll talk about mechanisms here with hydrogen, because we want to understand the logic and wow, that's crazy. How is that even possible? What's happening? We want to understand that. But in the end, we want to know, what are the primary clinical and secondary endpoints of the human clinical studies, because that's what really matters.
That's what matters. Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting, because let's just talk about antioxidants for a minute. There's this idea, like you said, that more antioxidants is better. There are countless supplements sold as antioxidant supplements, right?
Marketing.
Yeah, and whether it's polyphenolic compounds from plants that are in a pill and not in the plant. It's an incredibly complex thing. It's so interesting that you give people carrots. Maybe it has a different effect than giving people just purely beta carotene, right? We've seen this over and over, which is why I think, reductionism in nutrition doesn't always play out. Like you're saying, you don't see the same clinical endpoints when you reduce something to its parts. There's a lot of nuance here. Food is so complex, which is why the organs are interesting to me. And, that's just why I think it's cool to make the supplements with this, because we're taking organs and we're basically just freeze drying them and trying to make a whole food in a capsule as close as we can. And so the organs have microRNAs and peptides, and it's a very complex thing. And so when we strip something out of a food, it doesn't always work the same way. And conversely, it's why I always worry a little bit about the ultra processing of foods, and we're stripping things out of foods
Yeah.
that aren't supposed to be there, or we're putting things in that aren't recognized by the human body in terms of additives. Anyway, I'm digressing, but if we get back to this idea, like, what is the data with antioxidants in human health? It's not very good. It's almost
Right.
it's almost bad, and especially in exercise.
Yeah,
Vitamin C.
blunts exercise performance. It prevents mitochondrial biogenesis. So the real question is, how is hydrogen any different?
Right.
Because we say hydrogen is also an antioxidant, and so many studies show it has antioxidant effects. Is that a bad thing?
That was my concern at first. I thought, how could you be taking something that is presumably doing some reduction?
Right? Yeah.
If it's quenching an oxidant, right? If it's getting rid of oxidation, and getting rid of free radicals, or getting rid of species that I want to talk about, specific species, how do we say that it doesn't do that too much, right? Because there's, like we've said, there is this buzzword, oxidative stress. There's also reductive stress. And
yes.
Yeah, which is when you don't have enough of these things. And you hinted at this, like, when we exist as humans by stripping electrons from the food we eat, moving them through the cytoplasm into the mitochondria, using intermediates, FADH2 and ADH, to put these into the electron transport chain, and then eventually creating molecular water and producing superoxide in the mitochondria, which is an important signal. Like, there are valuable oxidative species in the human body that we don't want to get rid of.
It's amazing you say that too, because when you produce superoxide, it actually has unique signaling effects, and then it goes through superoxide dismutase to create things like there's a number of things that happen, but they can then create hydrogen peroxide, which then has signaling effects, and then there's a specific aquaporin channel for hydrogen peroxide to go to transverse, and then it gets used like catalase or glutathione peroxide or something to be converted to water. So to your point, every free radical that's produced by the body, not everyone, but there's a reason that your body has conserved a mechanism to produce these free radicals.
They're valuable.
They're very valuable. It's a hormetic stress, right? This process of hormesis, where a small amount of a toxin can end up being beneficial for you. And when we exercise, we create free radicals. We're breathing a lot more oxygen. Obviously, we create more inflammation. But that stress is what mediates these benefits. So by taking high doses of conventional antioxidants, we're basically just attenuating that very signal that we want. And in that Nature Medicine publication from 2007, it demonstrates this very thing, that if you put hydrogen gas in the same place with nitric oxide or hydrogen peroxide, superoxide, there's no reaction.
So interesting.
Versus vitamin C, of course there's going to be a reaction, because vitamin C is a powerful reducing agent. It can donate electrons. It has what we know is a conjugated pi system. Many of these polyphenol compounds, vitamin E and so on, they can donate their electrons and remain stable because it's easy for that to do that. Molecular hydrogen doesn't do that. So that's from a chemistry perspective of why hydrogen can't do that. It's about the rate constants of molecular hydrogen, second order reaction kinetics. Now, there's another explanation, which is even better.
Okay.
It's how hydrogen modulates our body's natural antioxidant defense system. So our body, as you know, creates its own antioxidant protection, just like vegetables and fruits and other animals, right? If you take like an apple and you cut it in half, it turns brown. Well, that's because all the oxygen is oxidizing it, right? But it's not brown when it's on the tree, because the apple itself also has antioxidants, and so it's preventing that oxidation from happening. And that's why we can consume the apple or the carrots, and we can get those antioxidants out of us, and there can be some benefits as long as it's not too much. Well, our body also produces antioxidants. We produce things like superoxide dismutase, catalase, the peptide glutathione. These are our natural antioxidants, and it's regulated by a transcription factor called NRF2. This NRF2 KEAP1 is this pathway that, when it gets activated, NRF2 literally translocates into the nucleus, where it interacts with the DNA and induces the transcription of over 200 different cytoprotective enzymes and proteins. Our antioxidation enzymes and proteins, our detoxification, these are what's known as the phase 2 enzymes, basically. And hydrogen can activate this pathway. And it doesn't just activate it, it modulates it. Because, again, we don't want to have reductive stress. We want to have perfect redox homeostasis. And so and we've done this in a number of studies, when we administer molecular hydrogen, sometimes we see NRF2 is activated and subsequent rises in catalase and downstream enzymes. Other times, there's no change. And other times, there's a decrease.
In different individuals or in different situations?
Different situations.
Huh?
Different situations, because in like let's say that like we did a study in radiation toxicity. We're looking at miRNA changes, microRNAs.
Yeah.
And anyways, we also looked at some of these antioxidant markers. And in some cases, yes, hydrogen gas would increase the levels of antioxidants and now would exert a therapeutic cytoprotective effect. In other cases, there was also a therapeutic cytoprotective effect, but those levels were not as high. And that's because if hydrogen was able to protect the cell, like prevent excess apoptosis, prevent excess inflammation, all these things, then the antioxidant markers didn't need to be as high in order to exert the same protection. Hydrogen is a modulator of all these systems. Another great example is autophagy. Well, we know autophagy has a lot of benefits, right? This autophagy, this process of the cells cleaning out the cellular debris, the organelles that aren't working so well, cells that potentially are cancerous and so on. Autophagy can help with that. And a number of studies have shown that hydrogen can activate the autophagosome complex and activate and improve autophagy. It can also, like by decreasing inflammation, because if you have high levels of cytokine, like interleukin-6 cytokine, then that also prevents autophagy from happening. Hydrogen can help lower that, it can help get autophagy going, and you get these cytoprotective or neuroprotective effects. In other studies, in different models, hydrogen exerts very important cytoprotective effects by suppressing autophagy. Because if you have too much autophagy, that's called autophagic cell death.
Right.
That's another way that you have apoptosis and autophagy. You don't want to have too much.
Right.
Hydrogen can regulate this. So the same principles applies, like I was saying, with the NRF2 pathway. We know that if you have constituently activated NRF2 pathway, and this is like you can do genetic modifications, for example, and there's actually some genetic disorders where there's NRF2 is constituently activated, and so you have high levels of this NRF2 protein all the time, and that leads to cardiomyopathies, it leads to reductive stress, it leads to all sorts of problems because of reductive stress.
Because it's too much.
It's too much. And that is really, see, we had before the whole idea of the free radical theory of aging. Well, now it's more the theory, the aging problem is a redox dysregulation. Because it's not only that, okay, when you're young, you kind of start having oxidative stress and you get older and then you are reductive stress sometime. It's so much more complicated because you can have, not only in the same individual, a process of reductive stress going on and oxidative stress going on. You can have in the same organ that going on. You can even have in the exact same cell.
Really?
So like you have, let's say in the cytosol, too much oxidative stress that's going on. Too many free radicals are being produced from the mitochondria and so on. So you have oxidative stress going on there. Then you have the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum, which you need to have oxidizing power in order to fold your proteins correctly, because structure dictates its function. So if you don't fold the proteins correctly, they're not going to function correctly. And if you lack the oxidizing power, you're not going to be able to do the things you need to do. So in the exact same cell, you're having oxidative stress and reductive stress. This is a dysregulation. So why would you think that you can just take excess antioxidants and fix everything? Maybe you'll help this portion of the cell, but what about this portion? You just further exacerbated
What's going on in the endoplasmic reticulum in this case, which doesn't have it's such an interesting balance that, I mean, you see this in biology, right? Like I said earlier, reductionism in nutrition, reductionism in biology, it's dangerous. Like it's such a balance. Like you said, it's not, we're not just trying to take a million antioxidants. I think it was Linus Pauling that believed that vitamin C was the answer to everything. And he won Nobel Prizes, but he might not have been right about that.
He didn't win a Nobel Prize for showing that vitamin C was there. He won a Nobel Prize for something else, right?
Something else.
Exactly.
I think Nobel laureates, like, they're brilliant. Yes, and sometimes they get things wrong.
Exactly.
And so he was, there's still this concept that like, we need to megadose vitamin C. And you think like, well, we talked about why you wouldn't want to do that. And you think, okay. So it is just this balance. And I love what you're saying here, this redox homeostasis. If oxidation and reduction get out of balance in either way, like a seesaw, too much reduction or too much oxidation, you're going to have a problem. And you can have reductive stress, just like you can have oxidative stress. You were describing constitutively active NRF2, this transcription factor that's over activating genes involved in like controlling oxidative stress, and you have problems. You have cardiomyopathies.
Yeah.
We need this for signaling. So we don't want to get rid of everything. And this is where my brain started to kind of melt a little bit with hydrogen. And like you said, what an interesting molecule.
Yeah.
What an interesting molecule. Primordial molecule. Nobody created hydrogen in the lab. It's just on the earth. What an interesting primordial molecule that it seems to only affect, and maybe we'll learn more of the story, but right now there's this compelling narrative that does hydrogen do this modulating role? Does it only get rid of the most harmful oxidative radicals, right?
Yeah.
We talked about the hydroxyl radical, and I want to talk about how that's formed. I want to talk about peroxynitrate also, like these two things.
Yeah.
Like you said, like we talked about, right? Reactive nitrogen species, nitric oxide, valuable, right? Until there's too much. Superoxide, valuable until there's too much. Peroxide, valuable until there's too much.
Right.
So let's talk about, because this is interesting to me and kind of fascinating. Where does the hydroxyl radical come from?
Yeah.
And then where do other damaging radicals, presumably the peroxynitrite radical, where do these come from?
Yeah.
Because like you said, if I'm saying this correctly, like hydrogen seems to target the harmful ones selectively, which is, what is that? All right, guys, want to pause the podcast for 1 minute, talk about Whole Package from Heart and Soil. This is the men's supplement that we have at Heart and Soil. I joke that this is Heart and Soil dick pills. If you look at the reviews, it might just qualify as that. It's got testicle, blood, and liver. There's something interesting going on when we're eating testicle as men, or when we're eating ovaries, uterus, and fallopian tubes as women. Look at the reviews on Her Package and Whole Package on Heart and Soil, and you'll see what's going on here. Whether it's microRNAs, unique nutrients, or peptides, I take this stuff every day. I think it really helps me. I'm a 48-year-old man. I've never taken hormones. I don't take any peptides. My testosterone is great. It's over 800. I feel good. It has to do with my diet, my sleep, and I think the Whole Package helps, especially when I'm traveling. So if you're a man, check out Whole Package from Heart and Soil Supplements. If you're a woman, check out Her Package. It's at heartandsoil.co. All of the organs are grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised. We always put them in glass because we care about putting less plastic into the package. Back to the podcast.
Okay, so the way that I tend to talk about this when it comes to free radicals is it's all about the good ones are okay when they exist for the appropriate duration, the appropriate location, and the appropriate concentration.
Right.
And if those things are in line, we need them, they're good to go. But if you start creating the free radicals in the wrong location, so like nitric oxide, you have 3 different isozymes to make nitric oxide, right? There's endothelial nitric oxide synthase. So exactly, eNOS, so now that's great for your systemic cardiovascular system. Then you have things like iNOS, inducible nitric oxide synthase, and so if you have like an overreacted immune system, that's going to create oxidative stress, inflammation. Of course, sometimes you need that, sometimes you have too much of that, right? That can be a problem. Often you want to decrease iNOS, and then there's nNOS, neuronal nitric oxide synthase, and often you want to decrease, it can get too active. And so there's this dysregulation of the nitric oxide synthase. And hydrogen can help this entire process because, again, it's going to help activate, say, eNOS, but it can help suppress these other ones. Okay, so now we're going to help with the location-wise. And then we're going to talk about the duration. Well, if the nitric oxide is existing too long, that's problematic. If the concentration is too high, that's problematic. And so going into like peroxynitrite, well, the reason why is because if you have high levels of nitric oxide, and you have high levels of superoxide. Superoxide is very important, okay? But high levels of superoxide and nitric oxide, now their locations are going to start to converge. And when they react instantaneously. The only thing that's slowing down the reaction is the rate of diffusion. And when they react, they immediately form peroxynitrite, which is, it's not a free radical, it's a very powerful oxidant.
Okay.
And this oxidant is very pernicious because it's a little bit more stable, but a very powerful oxidant. And it can literally oxidize anything.
So it can steal electrons from something else.
Exactly.
And we kind of hinted at this, but I'll just repeat it so people understand. When you steal electrons from something, you can damage DNA, you can damage proteins, you can damage lipids.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the peroxynitrite, now that's formed, it can actually diffuse like through lipid membranes, and it can just damage so many areas, and it lasts long enough that it can get to very critical places that other radicals may not get to, like the hydroxyl radical. It could be argued that peroxynitrite is even more damaging than the hydroxyl radical just because peroxynitrite can go to further places, whereas the OH radical, as soon as produced, it's like already reacting with something. So, but hydroxyl radicals can be formed just by, say, the radiolysis of water, it's like through radiation, for example, or to take superoxide, and when that gets goes to a further redox reaction, that's when hydroxyl radicals are also being produced.
Through through peroxide.
Yeah, yeah.
So superoxide to peroxide.
There's a number of ways it can be made, but yeah, it's called the Fenton reaction.
The Haber-Weiss
reaction. Yeah, that's right. And this is very problematic, and that's why it's so cool that molecular hydrogen is able to target that free radical. But the biggest way it's targeted is actually through the NRF2. That's one way, and through prevention. Because just to put this in perspective, although we're talking about hydrogen gas as this antioxidant radical scavenger to like react with the hydroxyl radical, it's probably not very significant. And that's because of the second order reaction rate constants. Right. The hydroxyl radical, as I said, is already reacting with whatever is right there. So when you look at the concentration of hydrogen molecule, the hydrogen molecule is, billions of miles away from where the OH radical is. So it's unlikely for the OH radical to like somehow travel over there, react with that, and form water. Now it can happen, and that's my point with selectivity. Hydrogen, if it's going to react with the radical, the only one it can react with is the hydroxyl radical. Therefore, there is no risk of causing reductive stress. It's not going to just needlessly donate electrons into your body and cause harm. It cannot do that. Based on the most basic chemistry, it cannot do that. Okay? Now, I talked about how hydroxyl radicals were formed, right? From like the redox reactions, the Fenton reaction and superoxide production when those levels get high. Well, guess what? Hydrogen can suppress the elevated increases of, say, superoxide levels. So you have
steps.
Exactly. So you have like the NOx systems, the NADPH oxidase, when they get super active, you produce a lot more superoxide levels. Well, by hydrogen suppressing these levels, then you're not going to form as much superoxide. And therefore, you don't have a spillover to creating hydroxyl radicals. Right. So you actually have less production of hydroxyl radicals in the first place. And then your body is able to regulate the free radicals that are being produced. Because you have, in your body, you have superoxide dismutase that can handle superoxide. You have catalase or glutathione peroxidase that can handle hydrogen peroxide. Your body can handle these for the right duration and the right concentration in the right locations and everything. So if you are low in these enzymes, it's going to be problematic. Hydrogen can increase NRF2 pathway. It can activate these levels. Now your body is back into control. Right. Your cells are back into control of regulating these oxidants in the way they need to be before they start producing a bunch of hydroxyl radicals of peroxynitrite.
So you said it well, it's like a spillover, right? Your body produces superoxide, which can go to peroxide, and you have catalase, superoxide dismutase, glutathione, which are enzymes produced potentially as part of this NRF2 cascade. You have this transcription factor going to the nucleus, turns on the genes, these endogenous antioxidant sort of controlling enzymes, catalase, superoxide dismutase, glutathione, control these things. So hydrogen is potentially modulating NRF2. Yeah. It's potentially creating or modulating the production of superoxide in the mitochondria to prevent the spillover. Because it's interesting, it's like a spillover. When you have too much peroxide from superoxide, you get the hydroxyl radical. Right. And like you said, if you have too much nitric oxide, it can combine with the hydroxyl radical and you get the peroxynitrate. And it's interesting because I just want to touch on this. A lot of people, I think, may imagine, I had somebody tell me this, I forget exactly what the situation was. He said, man, I feel great when I take nitroglycerin. And I was thinking, I don't think you want to take tons and tons of nitrates, right? Like, people are abusing things like Viagra now, right? And look, if you have erectile dysfunction, you're using it in a setting that's okayed by your doctor, fine. But you could potentially, is it possible that you could create excess peroxynitrate by just taking lots of Viagra, by inhibiting the enzymes that break down these nitrates? It's like we're just messing with these pathways. You don't want to have a bunch of nitrate, you don't have a bunch of reactive nitrogen species, which is how sort of Viagra works, right?
Well, it's a number of points on this that's very interesting. So I believe the mechanism with Viagra is not the end production of nitric oxide, but it's a PDE5 inhibitor. Right. And so actually nitric oxide typically bonds to cyclic GMP, and then that creates cyclic CGMP, and the CGMP molecules then have all these signaling effects. And then that gets CGMP gets broken down by phosphodiesterase. So then Viagra inhibits phosphodiesterase.
Okay, so it's maybe not producing the nitrate.
So it's probably not producing the nitrate or nitric oxide. However, it brings up an important point, because this is the problem with aging. As you age, you have more of a dysregulation of your nitric oxide production. As we get older, we actually produce less nitric oxide than we should. And like an 80-year-old is going to have like 20%, or I don't know, shouldn't say the numbers, I forget, but it's a significant difference of what like a 20-year-old is going to produce. Those levels go down tremendously. And one of the benefits of even vegetables like spinach and different things that have they're actually rich in nitrate, and the nitrate gets metabolized by the bacteria in our mouth to create nitrite, and then nitrite gets converted in the body to nitric oxide.
Right.
And you have this whole nitrate, nitrite, nitric oxide cycling.
Right.
And that's really important. But a lot of people don't have the right bacteria to make that conversion. And when you get older, you have this dysregulation of nitric oxide. So now you could potentially produce nitric oxide in all the wrong places, all the wrong times. So someone with asthma, one of the ways to diagnose asthma is you measure your fractional exhaled nitric oxide levels, because you shouldn't have high levels. So you have this major dysregulation where people are making higher levels of nitric oxide than they should, but in the wrong locations, in the wrong durations and everything. Hydrogen is able to come and regulate these areas. So there's a really interesting crosstalk between nitric oxide, hydrogen gas, and other gas signaling molecules like hydrogen sulfide and carbon monoxide. So that's one point with the nitric oxide. We do need to be careful because nitric oxide, it is a free radical. And if those levels get high, you will produce peroxynitrite.
Too much.
And then that's going to cause a lot of damage. Nitrotyrosine levels is a marker. Anyway, it's very problematic. So people who want to take more nitric oxide products, it's like all the more reason you should be taking molecular hydrogen. And in fact, in the studies, and we've looked at this a number of times, but there's some pretty cool studies using hydrogen gas in conjunction with nitric oxide. And you can actually see that hydrogen attenuates some of the negative effects of the nitric oxide while potentiating its beneficial effects, including some of the same activities. Hydrogen can also increase cGMP levels. So it's actually like a nitric oxide mimetic in that sense.
And that's the mechanism that nitric oxide affects cGMP or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's how it interacts with, I guess, the whole PDE5 system. Do you remember hearing the stories recently about people taking the mouthwash? And how mouthwash attenuated.
Yep, 100%. This is why.
Because you need these nitric oxide producing bacteria in your mouth. And so if you destroy all these bacteria with some sort of alcohol-based mouthwash, you're essentially carpet bombing your oral microbiome. It's a horrible thing. I did a piece of content about natural mouthwash recently. I think most people who have halitosis or who suffer from bad breath don't have a mouthwash deficiency. You have dysbiosis in the gut.
Mouthwash deficiency.
You have dysbiosis in the gut. Mouthwash is not going to solve the problem. And as we don't want to carpet bomb our GI microbiome or the oral microbiome, there's so many benefits to these nitrates. But it is a balance, and that's so interesting to me. That too much nitric oxide from whatever is a problem. Too many of the hydroxyl radicals is a problem. In one of the papers you sent me, there were a couple of other things that I want to point out to people, other things that increase the free radicals, things like Tylenol, cisplatin, some things that, I think there's things people need to know about, heavy metals. This is how it all kind of ties in, that the reason, am I correct in saying this, that the reason that heavy metals are harmful for us is because they produce these sort of free radicals that create some sort of oxidative stress.
Yeah, I mean,
Tylenol does the same thing.
Yeah, that's obviously a contributor, right? I think some of these metals that there are some specific receptors they can also activate, and so
directly.
It can have negative effects indirectly, but oxidative stress, free radicals are always like at the root of pretty much every pathology. And hydrogen being a modulator like it is, this is why I think it's one of the reasons why we can see it influencing over 200 different human and animal disease models, because it's going to the root of oxidative stress and inflammation and cellular stress, resilience, your epigenetics, all of these things hydrogen is really promoting. And one other really important point just about the dual rule of hydrogen as an antioxidant, it also has a pro-oxidant effect.
Right.
And so we talked about how hydrogen can decrease superoxide production from, say, the NADPH excess activation, or the mitochondrial complex, complex 1, for example, can decrease production of superoxide levels. We also have we've also published articles showing that hydrogen has like a mitohormetic effect, where it can actually increase superoxide production, just like exercise. So if you're like in this place where you're maybe not producing much free radicals as you should, as your mitochondria should, as you need for signaling, that hydrogen will now increase that superoxide production. But if that production is already too high, it'll decrease it back to where it needs to be.
It is almost on an individual basis. It's like
That's on individual cellular basis.
Right.
Because different cells respond differently, depending on what toxin you give to it, or if you don't give toxins to it. It really is modulating the entire redox homeostasis.
It's pretty wild, man. It's pretty wild to think that something like this exists and that there is research to back this up. I mean, the study we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, you gave hydrogen water to people for 6 months and they saw improvements in multiple markers that give us an indication of metabolic syndrome. That's interesting, right? And these are the mechanisms. And to me, this got interesting, even more interesting, when I thought about the connections between oxidative stress and metabolic syndrome. And I don't want to get too technical. This is probably one of the more technical podcasts I've done, so I hope people are hanging on with us. We'll bring it back, guys. I promise you that we'll get it to be high level in the end. But there are mechanisms of oxidative stress in connection with metabolic dysfunction also. And I'm trying to connect these things in my mind and understand what's going on here. Have you thought about this at all? Like IRS1 phosphorylation in the cell membrane, right? So in order for insulin to bind to its receptor, you have to have IRS1, and that sort of regulates downstream signaling from when insulin binds to its receptor. And sort of part of the molecular mechanism for insulin resistance, quote unquote, is sort of inactivation of IRS1, which can be triggered by oxidative stress. And so in states of diabetes, in states of obesity, we see excess reactive oxygen species. In states of metabolic dysfunction, we see the production of things, and again, we're getting technical here, like ceramides and diacylglycerols at the level of the mitochondria because the energy production isn't working well, and those can trigger sort of signaling that triggers insulin resistance. And so it's interesting to me that, okay, if you can modulate oxidative stress, you can start to reverse some of the fundamental pathologies that, or at least the signaling pathologies that are driving metabolic dysfunction. There are other questions, and these are the most interesting questions for me. What is causing those imbalances in the first place? What is causing your excess oxidative stress in the first place? What is causing your mitochondria to not function well? But as a modulator, the connections between molecular hydrogen, oxidative stress, and metabolic dysfunction at a metabolic level, that's pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. And mechanistically, it's quite fascinating because when some of these studies compared molecular hydrogen to, say, metformin,
right,
hydrogen was like more effective, or similar or more effective in almost every parameter that was measured.
Is this in human studies?
No, this was in an animal study. They haven't done a direct comparison with the human study.
Wow, okay.
Not sure on that one, but interesting because metformin is kind of a hormetic agent, right, as a complex 1 inhibitor.
Well, I think the mechanism of metformin is not, they say maybe complex 1, but it's confusing, right?
It is very confusing, and it depends, we could really get into this a little bit, but it's interesting how metformin kind of works and what we kind of see with hydrogen, how I just talked about how hydrogen affects the mitochondria, various complexes with the superoxide levels and different things that are going on. But we've shown that it can induce mitochondrial rejuvenation, regeneration, because it enhances heat shock proteins and activates MTUPR, which is the mitochondrial unfolded protein response, which then activates mitochondrial regeneration, rejuvenation. We're working on a I can't talk too much about it, but we have the mechanism. We actually know exactly what's going on for this to happen. And
for the mitohormesis.
Yeah, for the mitohormesis. Yeah, we have the primary target of what hydrogen gas is directly targeting in order to induce this conformational change so that you can have these changes in the mitochondrial level and in turn this regeneration, rejuvenation of the mitochondria.
Mitochondrial rejuvenation, it's so interesting. And does it affect PGC1 alpha also?
Yeah, it depends again, because if you're normal, healthy rats or people, or whatever, you are unlikely to see increases. But anytime you have like a deficiency or a compromise or mitochondrial impairments or myopathies, that's when we start to see increases in PGC1 alpha levels. And so you have more energy production, right? And so now you talk about with diabetes, you have to have enough mitochondrial ATP production in order to activate the right channels to get insulin secretion in the first place. Okay, and this is the beta cells of the pancreas. So, because that's the first thing. If you want to get glucose into the muscle cells, you got to get insulin to be released, and from the pancreas. So first, hydrogen is protecting the beta cells from oxidative stress, from various toxins. There's a number of publications on this mechanistically showing how hydrogen protects pancreatic beta cells and it promotes the secretion of insulin. Now we're going to go to the muscle cell. And to your point, normally, insulin is going to bind to its receptor, tyrosine autophosphorylation, and then it goes through this PI3 kinase pathway, which can then induce the translocation of the GLUT4 translocator, right?
Into the membrane, and that's what glucose moves
brings
through.
in glucose.
Right.
Hydrogen also activates this PI3 kinase pathway.
Downstream from the insulin receptor.
Exactly. And so it's able to induce translocation of GLUT4 transporters.
Wow.
And you can actually inhibit this. Mechanistically, we've done this in animal studies where you can use a drug and you can inhibit the PI3 kinase pathway and prevent GLUT4 translocation induced by molecular hydrogen.
Wow. And again, it's modulates.
So we have insulin doing this, exercise does this, and hydrogen does this. Hydrogen is like a mild exercise mimetic.
Right. I mean, people say that DMT is like the God molecule. Like hydrogen is starting to sound like a little bit of a God molecule to me. Have you ever thought about this? Like,
oh, from a poetic perspective, it is amazing as well. I mean, hydrogen was the first, Professor Harlow, an astronomer, famous astronomer, he said, if God did make the world with a word, that word would be hydrogen.
Wow.
Right? I mean, it is the father of all the ancestors. The ancestor of all the elements, right?
It's the first element.
Exactly.
It's the simplest element, and it's modulating things at a cell. This is like, I mean, I don't know, like it almost sounds divine, like I don't.
That's what I'm saying. There's a divine aspect to it.
Yeah, there's a divine aspect to it. And I'm sort of spiritual, but not religious. I've been in so many grand natural settings that I find inspiration in nature, but I'm not religious per se, but I'm going to, carefully use the word. Like it almost feels divine, and it's like a divine molecule. It's wild.
It's what powers the sun in fusion,
Yeah.
creating helium, the stars, everything, right? And it's quite, like I said, it's kind of romantic when you consider the fact that all of us are basically stardust, right? We all came from the stars. We're all literally made of this hydrogen in that sense from the very beginning. And hydrogen, the very first from the beginning, and now we're just, and actually was involved even in the genesis of life. Like from the theory of evolution, which was great models to explain how this would work, but the deep sea hydrothermal vents, you can imagine something like, iron as a catalyst and some other things, and then these hydrothermal vents are releasing hydrogen gas at these high temperatures, and hydrogen does 2 electrons, like a great energy source. And now iron can kind of catalyze this, the release of these electrons as an energy substrate, and now you have the first organisms. And then we've a lot of data suggests that hydrogen was what forged the bond to make eukaryotes, from archaea for bacteria basically to eukaryotes. That's a plant and animal cells.
Right.
And even plants, they have these enzymes called hydrogenase enzymes. So bacteria do, and some plants have this hydrogenase enzyme that produces and consumes hydrogen as an energy source. And humans, we do not have this specific enzyme, but we do have the genetic hallmarks for the enzyme, suggesting we also have conserved targets. And the evolutionary similarity between mitochondria and bacteria,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're very similar to each other.
This is primordial.
So it literally goes back, we have the origins of the universe, the genesis of life, and the evolution of life. And then as we evolved and we developed a healthy gut microbiome, and our ancestors, right, they would eat sometimes a lot of fiber, and that fiber would produce lots of hydrogen gas. So they would eat, meat and fibers, the fibrous vegetables or whatever, right? And they didn't produce lots of hydrogen gas. And now, I mean, they say we should try to get like 15 grams of fiber for every 1,000 calories, so about 30 grams a day, which a lot of people are not getting. But our ancestors could be eating like 100, 200 grams of fiber.
Yeah, I wonder about the fiber with our ancestors. That's a whole separate topic. But it's interesting because it speaks to this idea that there are hydrogen-producing bacteria in the gut.
Yeah.
And there are methane-producing bacteria in the gut. And at a microbiome level, we do not have this figured out. But the idea that we could fuel hydrogen-producing, bacteria in the gut is fascinating to me.
Well, and it's interesting the correlations. And again, correlation is not equal causation, but these are important correlations that I want to point out. That in general, the more hydrogen-producing bacteria an individual has, the healthier they are. And we've seen this like with Japanese centenarians. They have higher levels of breath hydrogen naturally out of their breath because you eat fibers, hydrogen gas metabolized, and then you can measure that in their exhale breath. Japanese centenarians have higher levels of breath hydrogen than people who are younger and don't become centenarians. When you exercise, you tend to have higher levels of breath hydrogen.
Really?
People who have
Is it from a gut microbiome?
Yeah, it's just gut microbiome.
The gut microbiome is producing more hydrogen when you exercise?
Yep, exactly. Also, when you have different diseases, so like Parkinson's, for example, those who have Parkinson's disease, when you analyze the fecal matter, their bacteria, they have less hydrogen-producing bacteria than those who don't have Parkinson's or other cognitive impairments and so on. So these are very interesting correlations suggesting that, yes, hydrogen may be playing a role. And probably the best direct evidence comes from an animal study where they took rats and they gave lactulose, which is a fiber, right? And they fed it to the rats, and there was hepatoprotective or liver protective benefits to the liver after they gave some toxin. But when they gave they did with the study, they actually genetically engineered the bacteria to remove the hydrogenase enzyme so that they could metabolize the lactulose but not produce hydrogen gas. And when they gave that bacteria back in and they gave the lactulose, it was metabolized, but there were no benefits.
Wow.
So in this case, all those benefits seem to have been mediated by the production of hydrogen gas.
In the gut.
In the gut.
In medicine, we give patients lactulose when they have liver failure, I believe. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, and actually there was some studies, human studies, showing that some of these like acarbose, lactulose, and other things have these cardiovascular protective effects and cerebral vascular protective effects. And so now the question is it because of hydrogen gas mediating these other benefits that we didn't think about? Because originally it was like for the liver or other things, and you were seeing all these other benefits. Maybe it's because of the hydrogen gas was being produced.
So interesting. And there's so many things we'll get to in this podcast. Later on in the podcast, I want to get to inhaled versus oral hydrogen water. But I'm wondering if, as a foreshadowing, if you're drinking hydrogen water, if that fuels hydrogen producing microbes, maybe, can you affect your gut flora?
Yes, you do affect it, well, according to the clinical research, and a lot of animal studies on this, but that is one of the benefits of drinking hydrogen water is it appears that it improves your microbiome. Now, it's not going to directly increase the amount of hydrogen producing bacteria because that bacteria is already producing hydrogen gas.
Right.
Now, there's actually a good hypothetical concern, which is, are you increasing the hydrogenotrophs? This is the bacteria that consume hydrogen gas. And if you increase that bacteria,
that's going to decrease.
That could be a bad thing because the more methogenic bacteria and sulfate-reducing bacteria, where you're producing hydrogen sulfide you have, that's correlated with not good health. And so there's a logical reason why, well, if I'm drinking hydrogen water, literally fueling or providing the fuel to this methane producing and sulfate or hydrogen sulfide producing bacteria, then it can make things worse.
Right.
But the clinical studies don't bear that out.
Really?
And so in fact, they were seeing improvements in the microbiome, as well as various postbiotics like short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, and other benefits from the microbiome in general. And mechanistically, if we just go a little bit deeper than what seems on the surface, you see like let's say H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori. This causes ulcers. Well, this also hydrogen gas is an energy source for the H. pylori bacteria. But the KM, the Michaelis-Menten constant, right? Okay, going back, right?
Yeah, let's go.
But it's very, very small. So in other words, the hydrogenase enzyme has a very high affinity for molecular hydrogen. So it only needs a very, very low concentration for the enzyme to be working at its maximal level. And with this bacteria, it's already fully saturated with hydrogen, like a very, very small, nanomolar type level of molecular hydrogen. And so by adding more hydrogen, it can't make it grow any faster because it's already maxed out.
Okay.
But by drinking more hydrogen, you do get to these micromolar concentrations in the different tissues, the organs, the body, the colonocytes, and now you can start seeing systemic benefits to the host. Now you improve the immune system, you improve the environment and everything else, and now your immune system can get rid of these other bacteria, and you can start improving the environment for beneficial bacteria to overtake the pathogenic bacteria.
The microbiome is a whole separate thing. It's so interesting. Before we move on from this, are you aware of any studies looking at hydrogen-producing microbes in the gut and what sort of things modulate that? Does more fiber increase hydrogen-producing bacteria? Is it other things? Because I know there's so many inputs that can affect the microbiome.
It's crazy.
UV light, for instance, like ultraviolet light affects the microbiome positively. Does ultraviolet light increase the amount of hydrogen-producing microbes in the gut?
It'd be interesting. I don't know of any research on that.
That'd be so interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it could be very interesting to look at. But we know that a lot of these health interventions like fiber, for example, yes, you can selectively start stimulating that bacteria. And so that's a good thing. It's interesting though, because I think it's a little bit controversial. It's interesting, the data coming out about fiber and how good is that really, what's really going on versus just taking like, kimchi and other like probiotic fermented foods, right? And where that really sits at. But regardless, yeah, I mean, if you have to feed the good bacteria something, right? So there's going to be something there, but can you just eat more fiber and therefore, not everybody has hydrogen producing bacteria. There's a small percentage of the population that don't. Plus, people that do maybe not have as much as they used to because of our environment today, the antibiotics that are overprescribed and so on.
Chicken, et cetera, yeah. I visited the Hadza. I talk about this too much on the podcast. They did not eat a lot of fiber when I was there. I was only there for 2 weeks, but they had almost no fiber when I was there. So certain times of the year they don't. I know Justin Sonnenberg at Stanford, who I want to talk to at some point, has done studies with, I think, microbial diversity. I think they looked at alpha diversity of the gut. And I think you're alluding to this. He didn't find, the fiber actually didn't increase or change the alpha diversity of the gut. But interventions with fermented foods did.
They
so
did.
like kefir, kombucha, things. So, like you said, it's questionable whether, we need to be eating 100 grams of fiber per day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but probably some fermented food or sunlight, who knows? But I think this is the frontier when it comes to the microbiome, but certainly hydrogen can be absorbed through there. So we'll come back to that.
The real question is, why does drinking hydrogen water help at all if you're already producing lots of hydrogen gas from the bacteria? Because you literally can produce liters of hydrogen gas
in your gut. Wow.
Per day. But yeah, when you drink hydrogen water, you're getting like less than 100 milliliters of hydrogen gas.
Right.
So how can that be any beneficial?
What do you think? You're the person to ask, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Funny you would ask. No, I've been thinking about this a lot. And I think it's pretty simple. It's because when you're producing that hydrogen gas from the gut, the concentration in the cells never reaches a micromolar concentration. It never reaches that micromolar level. It never reaches that threshold in your actual blood and body.
Right.
And so it's going to have beneficial effects on the bacteria. You get second messenger effects. Now you can start benefiting the brain and other organs and different things, but maybe not from the hydrogen molecules themselves because the concentration is not very high. When you drink hydrogen water, we can measure this. We can see what the concentration is. You drink hydrogen water, it goes into the intestines, it goes right to the liver, to the portal vein. It increases the liver concentration to 20 to 50, 80 micromolar concentration.
You can measure it.
You can measure it. You can, with a unisense electrode, you put it into the liver. You can take. And there's lots of ways that we've done this, and then it goes to the heart. And the heart pumps it to the lungs, and you can measure hydrogen gas within like 30 seconds, and it reaches a peak in about 5-10 minutes or so of hydrogen water. So that's the pharmacokinetics when you drink hydrogen water. But the fact that you're measuring it that quickly, it shows that hydrogen gas is literally going through the intestines into the blood and getting it was very bioavailable very quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So the concentration is one reason. The concentration is a lot higher. And versus like when it's just produced by the microbiome, it's over this long period, extended period of time, and it's like the rate of production is about equal to the rate of is equal to the rate of it escaping or being released, and so the concentration never really goes up high, and it's this spike, this intermittent exposure of hydrogen that might be important, kind of like a signaling, kind of like exercise or other things. It's just the spikes that are happening.
I've heard you talk about this. I heard you on another podcast talk about someone that made a hydrogen room in their house, right?
Oh yeah, in Poland.
And the idea was maybe you don't want that. Maybe you don't want to live in like more hydrogen. Maybe it is just an input that you want sort of occasionally, kind of like hyperbaric. You get hyperbaric oxygen, then you take time off, and you get hyperbaric oxygen, you take time off. Is that what you're thinking? That maybe hydrogen water, maybe we'll just get into this inhalation versus drinking the water now. When you're inhaling it, you don't inhale it all day, but I don't know, maybe you do want to inhale it all day. So do you want inputs and then, if we're talking about something that's a hormetic, it's like a signal and then on off, on off,
that's right.
on off. So yeah, is that what you think is going on?
I think that's very plausible, but I don't know that we really understand it. There was one study done where I was at Nagoya University in Parkinson's disease, and it's very interesting, but they damaged the substantia nigra through a toxin 6-hydroxydopamine, and
in animals.
In animals, yes, in animals, in rats. But they administer hydrogen 3 different ways: inhalation, they also did lactulose, and they did hydrogen water. And with inhalation, is 24/7 exposure, okay, with inhalation, there was no noticeable benefit.
Wow.
With lactulose, there wasn't really any benefit. They also did another one where it was intermittent hydrogen exposure to mimic the idea of drinking water, because the drinking of hydrogen water essentially prevented the development of Parkinson's disease.
So there was inhalation, intermittent inhalation.
Constant, yeah. So there's two ways.
Right.
Constant inhalation or intermittent inhalation.
Right, and the intermittent inhalation was to mimic
the drinking of water. Because when you drink the hydrogen water in these rats, it essentially prevented the development of Parkinson's disease.
But 24/7 didn't.
Yeah, but 24/7 didn't.
Yeah.
But the intermittent exposure was effective. Still not as effective as the drinking of hydrogen water, which we understand some of the mechanisms, some second messenger systems that are enacted by drinking hydrogen water that doesn't get from inhalation. So that kind of feeds to the idea that, yeah, maybe this intermittent exposure is more effective. But what does intermittent mean? Because in one of the studies I sent you, published in the Lancet, with post-cardiac arrest syndrome, they inhaled hydrogen gas for 18 hours a day. Okay, so in a lot of these studies, we use hydrogen gas for several days at a time, right? And then so I think there's probably some benefits to always being exposed to hydrogen, but we don't really know what is the optimal dose or concentration or things, but we do know what works based upon the clinical studies, So now we have to hone in on, well, what doesn't work, so we can kind of optimize the protocol.
Right. So let's talk about the protocol a little bit. So is it worth inhaling, pie in the sky, right? Unlimited resources, and then we can talk about what's more functional or what's more reasonable. But if somebody has access to it, is it worth doing inhalation and drinking hydrogen water? And how do you think about those two things? And then we can drill down on both of them. Maybe we can start with inhalation and then go to the water.
Yeah.
And like you said, try and debunk some of the misinformation that's out there and let people know about the quality of devices and things like this. So is it worth doing both? And then
I think it's totally worth doing both, because the pharmacokinetics are different, and the pharmacokinetics are different. The pharmacodynamics are also different. So when you drink hydrogen water, that's an oral route. You're going to influence more of the gut microbiome, of the intestines, the liver. The concentration is going to be can get pretty high because it's just a bolus of hydrogen just coming like right there. You get induction of various second messenger systems. There was a study that was done that actually compared the two, and they see different gene expressions that were changed differentially depending on if it was hydrogen water or hydrogen inhalation, or if they were combined together, there's other effects, other benefits. So when you inhale hydrogen gas, that's going directly into the lungs. It's going to go dissolve into the blood. There's no carrier like hemoglobin or something for the hydrogen molecule. It doesn't need to. It's going to dissolve into the blood according to the partial pressure or the percent of hydrogen gas being inhaled. And so inhaling, 2% hydrogen gas can reach around 12 micromolar concentration, which in cell culture studies we have shown is therapeutic. It's enough to exert these beneficial effects.
So 2% hydrogen, you can reach 12 micromolar in the blood.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And sometimes there's a dose-dependent effect with inhalation. Like, higher is more effective. And other times that's not true.
Wow.
Like sometimes actually 4% is not, in an animal study, for example, that's one of the Nature Medicine, 4% was not as effective as 2%. So you actually want to be able to have a precise dose of hydrogen. That's why in this study in Lancet, they used 2% hydrogen, because in all the animal studies, it shows that 2% was more effective.
2% inhaled hydrogen gas.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So going to some of these benefits then, and just some of the differences, when you inhale hydrogen gas, goes to the blood, and it's going to diffuse just, Brownian motion, equilibrium, and it's going to basically reach that concentration in all your cells, right? Your muscles, your big toe, your brain, everywhere, right? Whereas hydrogen water, the hydrogen molecules from drinking hydrogen water probably won't reach the distal organs and tissues of the body, just because it's going to get to the heart and just go to the lungs. Most of the hydrogen gas is expelled out, but we still see it has benefits, largely probably through these second messenger systems.
Okay, so let's talk about inhalation in detail. I guess there's I've done some research on this. There's a lot of different things out there for people. Like, how do you, if you want to inhale hydrogen, how do you find a reasonable device to do this? Like, what should you look for? Because it's dizzying, and then you read the reviews. This one doesn't work. This one does, and there's all kinds of weird stuff for the inhalation. Yeah,
it's a very good question, and we also have to be careful because hydrogen gas is explosive. Well, hydrogen gas is flammable, and then you also have oxyhydrogen, which is explosive, right? So that's what we have oxygen, hydrogen combined together, and people think that this is going to be more therapeutic or something.
Oxyhydrogen in an inhalation.
Yeah, so you inhale like a nasal cannula, and you're inhaling both oxygen and hydrogen.
This is the Hindenburg, right? Wasn't it? hydrogen blimps. Like the Hindenburg is boom, right?
Exactly.
If people don't know the reference, we'll put like a piece of B-roll. Like it's like this is a big blimp that just exploded, right? Yeah.
Major catastrophe. And this has actually happened in Japan, where hydrogen is much more prevalent. There are a number of case reports. I was actually a reviewer for an article that'll be published here shortly. But they document 12 other instances where people have been like inhaling this oxyhydrogen and like with a nasal cannula, and there'll be a static discharge, something happens, and that will go off and fractures their nose.
Wow.
Or other people, they'll be inhaling hydrogen, and like one person had like a combustion inside of their internal organs. They had to go to the ICU. There was blood like all over.
How do their internal organs combust?
Because hydrogen is explosive above a 4.6% concentration. If you're inhaling oxyhydrogen, 66.7% hydrogen, 33.3% oxygen, that all gets diluted, but still at a flammable level inside of your lungs. So the amount of energy needed to ignite oxyhydrogen is less than the amount of energy to cause a spark, a static electricity. It's a very small amount, actually. And so yes, it's rare, right? Maybe it happens 1 in 10,000 times, 1 in 100,000, but it has happened.
That's scary.
And so we need to be aware that this is flammable, and that's why in the research, like when I was doing my PhD, for example, and also studying in Lancet, we didn't use a machine like this because we can't even get IRB approval to do a study and use this in the hospital settings. So we actually had a company, a major gas company, right, make a tank of mixed gas. So you have medical grade, like 21% oxygen, right? And they would say, okay, we want to have 2.3% hydrogen or whatever it is, right? And the balance to be nitrogen.
Right.
And then we would provide the tank, as we do in this like Lancet study. They'd have a tank. And that way, every inhalation they would take comes only from this tank of air that contains that precise mixture. So now you have 3 benefits. You have a precise concentration. It's not all over the place, not fluctuating, because if you just have a nasal cannula, sometimes you're getting a therapeutic dose because you're breathing slow enough. Sometimes it's not therapeutic because you just took a sigh or you're talking or whatever, right? The concentration is all over the place. And if the concentration is all over the place, you can't really do good studies to really know the precise dosing. And then how do you equate that to what we talked about earlier about how sometimes the 2% was more effective than the 4%? Right? So it's really difficult with that method. That's why we will use the tanks of hydrogen gas. Or even they'll create these rooms that have exactly 1, 2, 3, or 4% hydrogen gas, and people just go in there for their therapy for several hours.
And it's not flammable.
It's not flammable. It's below 4.6%, exactly. And technically even below 10%. So that's how they'll do it in these studies. So you can get a precise concentration of hydrogen. It's always therapeutic because everything they're coming, we know what the concentration is, right? And it's non-flammable, right? So I've always been very interested in hydrogen inhalation and things, but it's been somewhat difficult to really feel comfortable always recommending, because what if somebody is a bigger individual and they're going to, the way they're breathing, their anxiety, whatever it is, they're going to inhale more. They may not even be getting a therapeutic dose of hydrogen, because it's not about how much hydrogen gas is being produced. It's about how much hydrogen gas is actually entering the body. And like when we're breathing, we don't inhale for an entire minute. We are the breathing is inhalation, exhalation, and transition. So we only inhale for about 20 seconds per minute, right? So you only have 20 seconds to the inhalation time. When you start doing that math, you start to require a pretty high volume of hydrogen gas per minute in order to ensure you're reaching the minimal therapeutic level, or FiH2, the fraction of inspired hydrogen, which is about 1% hydrogen.
Okay.
So, and this is where things are transitioning a little bit, because I consulted with a company, this InhaleH2, for the past 7 years to develop a device that could provide you a precise, consistent dose of hydrogen. So it's a precise concentration, it's always therapeutic, and it's non-flammable.
Right.
And that's the device that you've been using, and where it has that inflatable bag.
Yeah.
So every inhalation you take comes from within that bag at the precise concentration. Even if you just take a big breath, it's exactly the concentration. It doesn't get diluted down by the outside air.
Right, and it's like a face mask.
It's a face mask, right? And that way it's always precise. It's non-flammable. I mean, you could smoke with it. I don't do that, right?
I tried. It's fine. I smoked with it. No,
yeah, I'm sure.
no, it's scary thinking about exploding.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's, okay.
But we can use this in the clinical studies, and there's a lot of excitement amongst researchers now, because now we can do bigger clinical studies without having to rely on these massive tanks of gas.
Like, there's really nothing else like that on the market.
There's nothing else.
Yeah, when I look at other like hydrogen inhalation devices, it's like it's either oxyhydrogen, like you said, and it's flammable and it's dangerous, or they're just very low quality. So I think in terms, I mean, I'll say this, I mean, you can add what you'd like, but like in terms of hydrogen inhalation, like there's not a whole lot of great stuff on the market. You got to be pretty careful with that.
Yeah, I think
I hope you guys will bring this one to market soon.
Yeah, it should be ready in the fall. I mean, people can go onto inhaleh2.com and they can get to the device right there. But this way, it will ensure that you're getting a therapeutic dose of hydrogen. Because we've done the calculations. A lot of people are not getting a therapeutic dose of hydrogen, and to ensure you want a higher flow rate. But now you're really running that risk of making a bomb, and that's And there's been major catastrophes that have happened. It's sad. Like this, one of the, like in the report, the son reported that his dad, who had cancer, was inhaling hydrogen for therapy because he
nasal cannula or something.
Yeah, nasal cannula, yeah. And all of a sudden he heard this loud bang. He comes running in, to see what's going on, and there's blood all over, and his dad's like, major medical issue. He had to rush him to the ICU.
Yeah, it's gnarly. One more pause, guys. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast with Tyler, we've got new flavors of our Lineage meat sticks. If you guys haven't tried these, you got to try. We got garlic and onion, and we've got spicy Southwest style meat sticks. You guys asked for flavors. We made them. All the meat sticks, grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised beef. Look at the ingredients. Your grandmother would recognize everything in these. Check us out, lineageprovisions.com. We make honey, which is glyphosate-free. We've got tallow. We've got animal-based complete protein powder with beef protein and organs. So much good stuff in there. Our motto is eat like a human, and I know you guys are going to love it. So new meat sticks are out. You heard it here first. Check it out, lineageprovisions.com. Well, it's like you go back to hyperbarics. Like there's this idea that hyperbaric, you don't want to fill the hyperbaric chamber with oxygen. Similarly flammable, or if you're filling a hyperbaric chamber with oxygen, you have to be naked, or you have to wear cotton clothing. You can't bring electronics.
All that static electricity, right?
Yeah, a static spark. Yeah. If you fill a hyperbaric chamber, because a hyperbaric chamber exploded recently, and I think a child died. And I imagine, do you know, was it a hyperbaric chamber that was filled with oxygen?
I don't know if it was or not, but I heard about that. And I'll just say, oxygen is an oxidizer, so technically it itself is not flammable. It's just an oxidizer. Hydrogen is the fuel. This is why it's even more dangerous.
Right.
Because a hydrogen will burn. Oxygen just makes everything burn a lot better, a lot faster, a lot quicker, right?
You can't mess with the divine molecule, man. You
gotta
be careful with the divine molecule. Yeah. You gotta, this is a fickle molecule, man. You gotta be careful with it.
Yeah. But when it does ignite, you just form water, the life-giving solvent. It's kind of romantic when you put it all together.
Yeah, you just want to do that in your body,
Yeah,
on
exactly.
your face. Yeah, don't ignite, don't form water in your in your ethmoid sinus. You don't want to form water in your face and blow it up. But you have to be careful with that. Let's talk about hydrogen water. This is potentially even worse to me than inhaled hydrogen in terms of the number of devices that are just not real or fake or are not doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, so basically, like, what's the data on hydrogen water? Because one of the studies, I think the study you sent me in that 6-month study used hydrogen. What was the concentration of that one? Was it like?
It was a high concentration. Yeah, it was like over 10 milligram per liter was what they ended up getting.
And that's we use 10 parts per million.
Yeah. We like to use milligram per liter because ppm it is the same, but ppm can be confusing. Because ppm in this case is reference to a weight per weight ratio, but ppm often has reference to a volume per volume, right? Like 10,000 ppm, right, is like 1%, or maybe it's going to be a ratio, like talk about like deuterium depletion, and we talk about deuterium in water, that's ppm, but that's a mole to mole ratio, percentage-wise, not a weight-wise. Anyway, it just can be confusing, but yes, milligram per liter was a dose we were using.
10 milligrams per liter.
Yeah.
Because, when you look at these hydrogen bottles and stuff out there, or even look at the hydrogen tabs, it'll say this produces 6 or 8 or 10 ppm. So I want people to understand what they're looking at there.
Yeah.
What do you think is a therapeutic range and a dose of hydrogen water.
So actually, the therapeutic, the lowest therapeutic dose is actually quite low. And there's a clarification too, because we have concentration, we have dose, and unfortunately, most people are marketing the concentration.
Right.
That's really the fundamental problem, right? If you take like vitamin C, right? If you take vitamin C, a gram of it, right, and you dissolve it into a liter of water, you have 1 gram per liter. But if you dissolve it into 100 milliliters, you have 10,000 milligrams.
Yeah.
But so it sounds like, well, that's so much, but it's just a concentration.
Right.
We really have to talk about the dose. So when we talk about the dose, we do that calculation, which is simply take the concentration and multiply it by the volume of water.
So yeah,
that's going to give you the dose.
Per liter. You're drinking a liter or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Multiplying it by the liter or how much volume.
So like in this case, they were drinking like say 250 milliliters of water, so it's 10 milligram per liter. So they're down to 250 or 2.5 milligrams of hydrogen, right? But they would do that several times a day. Exactly. Yeah. So the total dose ends up being over 10 milligrams of hydrogen per day. So now, and ultimately we want to have dosing where it's like X milligrams of hydrogen per kilogram of body weight.
Okay.
Like that's really, the pharmacology wise, that's really what we want to end up getting to, but we're not quite there yet. But the lowest dose that's been shown to be beneficial is only 0.5 milligrams per day.
Total hydrogen.
Yeah, total hydrogen.
Wow.
That's enough to exert benefits, not necessarily the optimal amount. See, other studies have shown that is not enough to provide benefits in that specific model or that human study or something.
And is that inhaled or is that's
in water?
Right.
Yeah, that's ingesting from water. And 0.5 milligrams or the saturation of hydrogen is considered 1.6 milligrams per liter, right? Which saturation, that just means that because if you have 100% hydrogen gas in the headspace, it'll reach equilibrium and reach 1.6 milligrams. But of course, you could increase the pressure, and that's why we can get even 10 milligrams.
Yeah, how do you get 10 milligrams per liter of water?
There's two ways to do that. One, if you have like certain bottles or whatever, if you have the pressure is really high, then it's just based on Henry's law, which is C equals pKh, which is the pressure divided by the Henry's law constant for that gas, and you can get that concentration
just by pumping more.
Just by getting higher pressure, and that higher pressure will force the gas to dissolve into the water.
Right.
And then once you open it, the gas starts to immediately come out, but it's just like carbonated water. Like it's not going to vanish like that. Like it has a half-life of 2 hours or so. Like you have plenty of time to drink it.
But people drink it fairly quickly.
Yeah. Ideally, you should.
You don't just sip on it all day.
Especially when it comes to using the hydrogen-producing tablets, which is another way to do it. Because in that case, that hydrogen gas is not dissolved in the water.
There's
no pressure, and so it's not dissolved. The dissolved hydrogen concentration may only be around 2 milligram per liter. It's still slightly supersaturated, but it has a lot of micro, macro, and nanobubbles, and that are kind of stabilized in this quasi suspension. And you want to drink it when it's all cloudy white, because that's when you're getting the most hydrogen gas. And as soon as it goes into your stomach, then those gas bubbles will quickly, diffuse and dissolve into the bloodstream and so on. And you can measure increases in your breath hydrogen concentration in the plasma and so on. So we can see you're getting a high dose of hydrogen.
So I almost feel like, with a hydrogen tablet, maybe this is overkill. You'd almost want to fill a small plastic or glass jar. Obviously I'd rather use glass, but the pressure can break the glass if you're not careful. But I don't think a hydrogen tablet's going to break the glass. But you'd have a small glass jar.
We've done it.
Yeah, really, yeah.
The pressure can be high enough; it can break them.
I've broken glass hydrogen water bottles by just keep
pushing it. Yeah.
Like I want more.
Yeah, that's right.
Snaps. But yeah, a small glass jar, and you throw the hydrogen tablet in, and you close the jar. Yeah. And that might improve it.
We did studies on this, and that's what I initially thought is just based on Henry's law, partial pressure and it's going to be proportional concentration. It doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
And this is the reason why, because you have another chemistry principle. It's the Le Chatelier's principle. Okay. Going back to the K of equilibrium constant, right? So if we look at the reaction of magnesium plus hydrogen ions goes to magnesium ions and hydrogen gas. Okay. So we have products over reactants. So if we increase the amount of hydrogen gas on one side, which is going to be seen in this equation via pressure, as you increase the pressure, then you are going to cause the reaction to start going the other direction. And so it actually slows down the reaction. So you can try it. You can put the tablet in a closed bottle like that, and immediately you'll see a good reaction, and then it'll kind of slow, and then it'll just kind of stop. And you, if you were to measure that concentration, you'd be like, let's say 3 milligrams per liter or something. The reaction stopped. You still have unreacted magnesium that has a potential to make another 3 milligrams of hydrogen, but it's not going because the reaction is being pushed, the equilibrium is being shifted this way. As soon as you open that, all of a sudden that pressure released, so the reaction continues to go, but as those bubbles are being created, those bubbles actually sparge out or remove the gas that's already dissolved in the water. So that makes all this hydrogen gas, then it pushes the hydrogen gas that was dissolved out of the water, and now the final concentration ends up only being 2 to 3 milligrams per liter. But when you do it in the open cup with no pressure at all, then it causes the microbubbles and macrobubbles to be formed, and they just kind of stay in there a little bit, and you have a few minutes to down that.
That's the way to do it.
That's the way we measure with gas chromatography.
Wow, I was wrong.
And ends up being
so you
higher.
can open cup, hydrogen
that's
tablet.
the best way. Warm water. Yeah, if you do cold water, then you slow down the reaction kinetics.
Makes sense.
We also tested this as a gas chromatography. Slows things down, you don't get the fast reaction, you don't get the bubbles formation, and the concentration is just not as high. So when we did the studies, we want to have the participants basically use room temperature water, use 250 milliliters of water so they can drink it all at once, throw a tablet in, and as soon as that tablet rises to the surface, they immediately drink it.
As soon as the tablet rises to the surface?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So the tablet's going to disintegrate, and then it's going to come to the top and then continue dissolving. As it's like, once it rises to the top, it's floating on the surface, that's when you start drinking it.
Oh, really? Do you drink the like semi-dissolved tablet? Oh.
Yeah, just finalize the reaction. Your stomach acid makes more hydrogen gas.
Yeah.
And doing it that way, you end up getting the most hydrogen.
And I mean, because that doesn't take that long,
90 seconds.
90 seconds. So you throw the tablet and you wait 90 seconds and then you drink it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I think I'm waiting too long with the tablets. I'm waiting like 3 or 4 minutes.
No.
So it's completely dissolved.
Yeah. You don't want to. You want to make sure it's room temperature water. If it's cold water, you're missing a lot. You're still getting the benefits of magnesium. Yeah. Right. And you're still getting actually more hydrogen than most clinical studies. Right. So when it comes to a therapeutic dose, well, like I said, 0.5 milligrams. That's like a quarter of a tablet. Right. So one tablet is going to give you more hydrogen than most clinical studies. But there does seem to be a dose-dependent effect, at least with hydrogen water. You want a little more. There's no evidence for hydrogen water anyway that a higher concentration is less effective. Okay.
And then some of the bottles are tricky, right? Because they have the proton exchange membranes. Yeah. So we're still talking about, hydrogen water. Any recommendations in terms of how to find a bottle, or is it just the tablets work better?
No, it's kind of subjective, I think there's some bottles, there's some other like electrolysis machines and things that can work well. It's just, in general, the concentration is not going to be as high, and they're not going to be as consistent, because sometimes these bottles and other products, just over time may not last as long.
The proton exchange.
Yeah, because like calcium, for example, from the tap water can kind of, you can start to get onto the membrane, and it doesn't work as well. You can clean it with citric acid, maybe the battery life, but it also becomes somewhat subjective, because again, if you are able to always afford a tablets and it's just for you, maybe that's fine. But maybe if you have like a family trying to give everyone some hydrogen water, you get some, then it can kind of be expensive. And so like I have several water bottles. I have a flask. I have, the number of products that I have, and I also have the tablets, and I find myself, I can use all of them. But for a consistent dose of hydrogen, I like to use the tablets, just because I get a high dose. I get the benefits of the magnesium. I will say that there are some concerns with all these products in terms of the contaminants. Yeah. Because with the membrane, are you putting, is material leaching from the membrane into the water?
Right, this is the proton exchange membrane in the bottle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or the electrodes. You have water in direct contact with the electrodes. Yeah. Right? Is that a problem? My recommendation with bottles and pitchers and other things is, if you want to use that, don't always use fresh water. Don't leave the water overnight or whatever on there, just in case. And to make sure it's clean, you want to make sure that any product you get is certified to IHSA criteria, International Hydrogen Standards Association. So it's tested by H2 Analytics, and basically do concentration of hydrogen to make sure the concentration is high enough, it's above the minimal threshold. And number two, it measures all these other metals and contaminants to make sure it's not toxic when used the right way. So again, not leaving the water in the machine all day.
Right.
And the same thing with the tablets. You want to make whatever magnesium products you're using. There's like stick packs and things that are coming out there. You got to be somewhat careful with any of these ones, just to make sure that they have that certification. There's some misinformation about the tablets in general, that they have metals contaminated with them, like lead and chromium and different things. Well, yeah, there's trace amounts of this stuff in like everything you eat, right? But all these tablets have been tested, and the amount is, like hundreds of times lower than what the EPA standards are, right? So but you want to make sure these types of tests are done.
IHSA?
Yeah.
Okay, and there'll be that certification
it'll be it'll be exactly, I'll say like certified by H2 Analytics, right? And that'll be, it's the certification is done according to the standards set forth by IHSA.
Okay. How do you program it? What's, like, I imagine you have 20 hydrogen devices. How do you use them throughout the day?
I typically, sometimes I'll forget. Like I don't notice immediate benefits from the molecular hydrogen. I know some people do, but often I'll be reviewing an article or looking at our results, and I'm like, dang, this stuff is good. I'm gonna go get me some of this, And I know some people, they feel like they have to have it every morning because they notice it's a big difference for them, right? But for me, I don't notice it a whole bunch. But I believe in our data. I think that the trends are really good. I know it's super safe, and so I want to try that. So I typically try to drink hydrogen water throughout the day whenever I can. I try to do some inhalation, 20 minutes at least to an hour, even longer. Like I said, some of the studies they do it for 18 hours.
Right.
So I don't think there's no downside. I don't think you're gonna have a problem doing it for too long. And I think people can just try to what kind of makes most sense to them. Maybe they try, several like 3 or 4 different sessions of like 20 minutes to an hour every day, just to kind of inhalation, just to kind of see what might work the best for them. And we're trying to maybe somehow collect this data, and so we can drive clinical research, so we can really optimize what that dose is, right? We'll get there, especially with the development of this new machine. Now we can really do more clinical research, because before there just wasn't really an option to give a therapeutic, precise, non-flammable concentration of hydrogen. And then in the evening, I will do hydrogen water, and I often will just use the tablets because it has the magnesium. Most of us are deficient in magnesium, and I'll just take that, great for sleep, and I'll just, so that's kind of my regimen I often use.
We talked about the mechanisms earlier: hydroxyl radical, peroxynitrate. Like, any concerns around exercise? Probably not, huh? I mean, I'm always thinking, does it enhance it?
Yeah, in fact, it seems that, like I said earlier, hydrogen seems to be, if anything, an exercise mimetic. We can see hydrogen can increase superoxide production. In one of the earlier studies with hydrogen water in elite soccer players, with helping to show it reduces fatigue, they also looked at DROMs and the marker of oxidative stress, basically. And in the hydrogen water group, when you hone in on the data, look at the table closely, you'll actually see that the levels in the hydrogen water group of the free radical production was slightly higher, and in some cases reached statistical significance. We see the number of studies that hydrogen sort of enhanced the effect, and then it goes back to baseline faster, so it's a faster recovery later on. And there's some other studies showing, like with hydrogen compared to, say, vitamin C, where vitamin C is basically able to blunt exercise-induced PGC1 alpha or mitochondrial biogenesis, whereas hydrogen not only doesn't blunt it, it actually promotes more. So we're working on another study, a really big study, I'm really excited about, where we can look to see the effects of hydrogen water on exercise performance. But already there's 20, 30 studies. I've published maybe 3 or 5 studies or something on exercise performance. There's a systematic review, meta-analysis specifically on hydrogen water, showing that, it does appear from the data so far that hydrogen does help improve endurance, reduces fatigue and so on. So, again, it's not a miracle cure, but again, with hydrogen being so safe, it's something that I think we can do more research on.
Yeah, it's super safe. So it's fine to drink before, after, during a workout.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is just consistency. Yeah, the drinking it consistently is going to be the most important, and then probably doing a pre-workout, because there might be some acute effects of hydrogen, the way it affects like the sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous activity, just kind of a pre-treatment with modulating oxidative stress, inflammation, to prepare for an oncoming assault of a bunch of free radicals that are being produced.
Yeah.
So I kind of like the idea of kind of a pre-treatment, and hey, if you can do it again, then do the post-treatment as well.
Yeah.
But a daily regimen of hydrogen, just like exercise. When is the best time to exercise? We can actually get into the nuances of when it might be the very best time of the day to exercise, but the most important thing is to exercise.
Just do it. Yeah, yeah. And so what about with hyperbarics? Because I'm getting into hyperbaric therapy. Again, it's probably only affecting the hydroxyl radical. If I were going to do a protocol with hyperbarics, should I think about before, after?
Yeah, I would say even more so the pre-treatment.
Pre-treatment.
Yeah, more so just consistency, same idea, taking it every day. But then yes, I would certainly do the hydrogen before. I would inhale hydrogen gas. Again, we need clinical studies, but this is just my opinion, right? I would do an inhalation session. I would drink hydrogen water, and then before I would get into the chamber. Just because that hyperbaric oxygen, it's beneficial because it's toxic for you. It is a very hormetic stressor. So the idea is that you're getting more benefits than negative effects. You're still getting negative effects, and your body is pretty good at like repairing cells and DNA damage or whatever, right? But getting this hyperbaric oxygen, unless you have a medical condition, it's not like your body needs more oxygen. You already have plenty of oxygen available for metabolism, and you're not going to now be consuming more oxygen because you're in a hyperbaric oxygen condition. It's that oxygen is having effects on the cell membrane and all these other areas, and right? So all the more reason to be taking the molecular hydrogen as a pre-treatment.
What about a post-treatment?
I also think it's good. I just think that if I were to bet, in general, I would say a pre-treatment would be more effective than a post-treatment. And the most effective would just be taking it consistently. Like if you would just take it for 7 days and then the 7th day don't do any hydrogen, let's say, and you just do hyperbaric, that will probably be more effective than just taking hydrogen right before you get it, like just an acute dose. So because hydrogen alters gene expression, it alters so many things, it prepares your body to handle the upcoming assault, the upcoming stress.
So doing even 3 or 4 days of hydrogen before you started a session of hyperbarics.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, that's why hydrogen is something you should take like every day. It's just a better. It's a way of life.
It's so interesting. I'm gonna have to send this to Brian Johnson. I mean,
I've funny because I was just gonna talk with him because I have another content, but I'm thinking with him about him because he and I have a lot of interesting connections, and so I'd love to talk with him about this. I'm sure he would love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the internet's gonna love the fact that I'm hanging out with him, or at least talking to him. We differ on some things, and Yeah,
that's good.
I called him out on his hormones previously, but whatever. But he has a hyperbaric chamber in his garage, and I was at a conference of his recently. I actually went, admittedly, to troll him. We did not end up trolling him, but he was on stage, and then one of the guys on his team was like, "Yeah, I don't think there's anything to hydrogen." And I'm thinking, like, I don't know. I think he's missing something there. They were of the opinion, at least in, I think it was May or maybe March of this year, 2025. We're recording this in July. That the hydrogen just got consumed in the stomach acid or something. But I mean, all this data you're suggesting, it's like clearly.
Oh yeah, that's why I wanted to. I wanted to clarify the chemistry in the very first place, because people assume that hydrogen in water has a reference to like pH or alkaline water or something, and it's going to get neutralized by the stomach acid. And that is a fundamental misunderstanding of chemistry. And you have a chemistry background. So I don't think
it's foggy, but I try.
But I don't know that you fully understand the frustration of how many people I have spoken to who they just have this in their mind that hydrogen water is going to get neutralized by the stomach acid or something. I'm like, dude, if you increase we're not talking about the hydrogen ion.
Right, it's different.
If we were talking about the hydrogen ion is what makes the pH acidic. So like in every way you think about it, you're wrong.
Yes.
And most of the criticism from mainstream scientists about hydrogen water has been fundamental misunderstandings about what hydrogen water is. Because they hear hydrogen water and they automatically assume water already has hydrogen in it. What a scam. Or hydrogen, like the hydrogen ion. And we have, there's some credible influencers, so to speak, on social media who have said negative things about hydrogen water. And I completely agree with everything they said, except the fact that they fundamentally misunderstood what we're talking about. Therefore, it's a straw man fallacy completely.
Right, right. So the idea is that like pH is a logarithmic scale of the hydrogen ion,
Right.
not molecular hydrogen, as you said at the beginning of the podcast. Completely different things.
Fundamentally different chemical species.
Fundamentally different things. We're not drinking acid water.
Oh my gosh, exactly. They give the hydronium ion or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's complicated. It's even more complicated because some marketing companies selling hydrogen water promote H4O water.
Oh.
There's no such thing as H4O water. That's like totally different chemical structure. Like you can't, H4O would be like, because you have a hydronium, which is H3O plus. So another proton on that to make H4O, H4O2 plus, that'd be like a super duper acid.
Right.
Like you can't do that.
It's not H3O.
Right.
It's not H4O.
And then you have H3O2, which is like the structured, the fourth phase of water, the easy water.
Okay, tell me about
Are you
this.
familiar with this?
I've seen some stuff about it. Yeah.
There's this idea from Professor Gerald Pollack, the University of Washington. He's published a number of papers, but they're all like in his journal, and they're interesting, but they've also been, from what I can see in the literature, have been debunked over and over again, and they fundamentally misunderstand some of the basic principles of water chemistry.
Right.
Now, he has drawn a lot of attention to some very interesting things. For example, the fact that the water in our bodies is all structured. Most of the water in our cells are structured, which means that it's not just this free-floating bulk water that, like, you have a glass of water and you see it floating around like that, but it's actually kind of part of the cellular constituents in our cells. So like muscle is like 90% water, but you can't like take your steak and just like wring it out like a paper towel.
It's never worked for me.
It doesn't work. That's because the water has literally become part of that meat.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like,
right?
I can wring out a paper towel.
Right.
Right? That's not structured water, but I can't wring out the water from a steak.
Exactly, because it's like inside.
It's a gel.
It's a gel.
Okay.
And that's what they call it. It's a gel-like substance. That's the fourth phase of water.
All right.
That's where it comes from. But this is not a new concept. We've known this for a long time. Right? But then they have this idea that's like this H3O2, a novel water structure. You can't do that. You have a thing called aquaporins. And I remember talking with Professor Pollack just a little bit ago, and he wasn't aware that we actually have the X-ray crystallography structure of the aquaporin. Peter Agar won the Nobel Prize in 1992. Actually, we know what this looks like. And the water molecule, looking like Mickey Mouse, right? Oxygen and two hydrogens, right? It goes through the aquaporin in a linear single file way, and it actually has to change its orientation as it goes through.
Wow.
Because it excludes the hydronium ion, the H3O molecule, and the hydroxide OH. It'll actually exclude those molecules from entering. So only the water molecule with that specific bond angle of 104.45 degrees can enter. So if you had a different water structure or a different hydrogen bond angle, you couldn't get the water into the cells. If you could actually structure water the way that they are saying, you would drink that and die.
Right.
In fact, we know that even further, because if you take heavy water, deuterium water, which does have slightly different structure of water.
The angles.
It's a little bit different, and the hydrogen bond is a little bit stronger. All these are a little bit different, and you were to change out all the water with deuterium heavy water, you would die.
Right.
And so
because it wouldn't move through the aquaporin.
It would have a difficult time probably. The kinetics would be so off.
Biology is so incredible that there's an aquaporin channel in the X-ray crystallography, and it's the exact thing that goes through what the heck, man?
Such an amazing exclusion criteria. So now tech engineers are trying to figure out how can we base like a water filter, like that's the best water filter.
The aquaporin channel.
Exactly. If we can just make something like that, you can just run seawater right through there, and it's an osmosis type process. Anyway, it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty incredible.
Ideas.
I mean, I haven't really. It's funny because the more I learn about biology, the harder it is for me to not believe in something bigger. We talked about divine molecules and stuff. It's like, wow, this is so incredible. Like, how did this happen? I mean, who knows? I am a three-dimensional being. Maybe I just don't have a brain big enough to comprehend how the universe did this with the Big Bang, and maybe there is no God or whatever you want to call it, and I'm not religious, but it's like, it's so elegant and beautiful and interesting that it's like, wow, there's something really cool there. I don't know. I don't know what that means, other than maybe we should all just like be kind to each other and try to live good lives. I don't know if we'll meet anyone after we die, or what the whole life is about, but there's elegance and beauty in life that you kind of discover when you start peeling back the layers and you see this incredibly beautiful chemistry, biology, molecular biology, bond angles, it's like, I mean, hydrogen is like this, it's a proton and an electron. It's the simple, and then what is a proton? What is an electron?
It's funny, because you talk about how in life, everything is based upon the flow of electrons.
Yeah.
And actually in chemistry, the two main reactions, the two main chemistry is redox chemistry, flow of electrons, and acid-base chemistry, the transfer of protons or hydrogen ions. Thus, the most fundamental chemistry is all about the hydrogen, right? Flow of protons, acid base, hydrogen ion, or redox chemistry, right? With the flow of electrons. It's really fascinating.
Everything is built on that.
And then you have, so we talk about oxygen, like everyone's talking about oxygen, we need oxygen to live, right? But oxygen is slowly oxidizing us, causing free radical damage. Then we have hydrogen, which is like the opposite end of the yin and yang, type concept. And when the two react together, you form water, the life-giving solvent. So water is like the perfect redox balanced molecule, 1 part oxygen, 2 parts hydrogen. We need hydrogen.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, man. It's wild. And thank you for talking about the structured water, because I know people have questions about that. I mean, how long have you been drinking hydrogen water? I learned about it in 2009. Have you been doing it since then?
So pretty much, yeah. I learned about alkaline ionized water. That's how I got into this. And I remember learning about all the things that the company was selling and things, and I was like, I don't know, I didn't have a background in science. I was interested, but I didn't have a strong background. But I was like, if a fraction of this stuff is true, like I want to try this. Like I'm very into taking control of my health at a young age and everything, right? So when I started my university studies, I started asking my professors about alkaline ionized water and some of the claims I was hearing, and primarily it was about the benefits of alkaline water.
Right.
And they're like, dude, no, that you cannot, even if you believe in the idea of alkalizing your body, you can't do that with water, because water is not a buffer, right? It can't resist changes in pH, and it's very simple chemistry. I mean, just a tad bit of lemon juice or whatever will neutralize any alkaline water. So there's not going to be benefits from there. And then there's the structure of water. That was the other big one. People talking about microclustered or structured water. And I mean, there's so much data out there, strong data, showing that there's no difference between structured water and unstructured water. When you really get into X-ray, diffraction, light scattering, there is no difference. And if there were a difference, we could see it with simple chemistry experiments. And I did this. It's called the colligative properties of water, where, so if you're cooking, for example, you can add salt to water.
Right.
And the reason why is because that's going to increase the boiling point of water. It's called the Boileau boiling point elevation.
Okay.
Now we're going back to the Genichem, right?
Yeah.
So by adding salt to the water, and it's so specific that you can actually determine the ionic concentration of the salt based upon the change of temperature, whether it's the increased boiling point or the depression of the freezing point, right?
Yep.
Well, that's because you just add these ions, and those ions just change the structure of the water a little bit like that, and it's going to have these drastic effects. Well, if you take the exact same water, structured and unstructured, structured, right, and unstructured, if they have the same mineral composition, there is no difference in the surface tension, in the colligative properties of the Boileau boiling point or freezing point, depression, elevation, and so on.
Yeah.
So anyway, this has been studied extensively, and I did this at the university as well, because I with this machine that I had to really investigate everything, and that's when I came across, there is this ORP, this oxidation reduction potential of this negative RP of the water. What's causing that? And that's through the research I found hydrogen gas is also being produced when you do electrolysis, and then I found hydrogen gas is also therapeutic, and I'm like, okay. And that's kind of what really transitioned everything into focusing my research on molecular hydrogen.
So wild. When I was like in the 5th grade or maybe 4th grade, I did a research project about the freezing temperature of water with salt in the fridge. And
cool.
I remember, when I lived at high elevations in the mountains, we would add salt to the water because, at high elevation, water boils at a lower temperature, I guess. And so if you can raise the boiling point of water by adding salt to the water, because spaghetti doesn't cook as well at high elevation, because the water is boiling at a lower temperature because there's less pressure, and it's such interesting chemistry. So you add the water. And I guess maybe that's the reason to add salt to the water, even at even at sea level, is that something about spaghetti, which I'm not a huge fan of unless you're in Europe. That's a whole separate conversation. Something about the temperature at which you boil the spaghetti affects the quality of the spaghetti. And I'll do another podcast, guys, on gluten in Europe and all this stuff. I don't eat gluten, in case anybody's wondering, but I've done stuff on sourdough. But it's interesting stuff, like the way that this affects it. But it's like you're saying, if you look at this, there's no difference in the colligative properties of water, for structured water versus regular. Alkaline water, structured water, there's nothing there, guys. There's nothing there.
We published an extensive, comprehensive review article. So on this topic of alkaline ionized water specifically, which is claimed to be structured water, microclustered water, all these things, and we'll have to put it in the show notes. But it's we basically go through every article, including some of our own that we published, but a bunch of other articles from other researchers that have all demonstrated that when you remove the hydrogen gas from the water, all the benefits are eliminated.
Right.
So only the hydrogen gas in the water is the reason for its therapeutic. And people who sell and promote and do the business, they also all know this intuitively, because they all say, drink the water fresh. Why is that? Because the gas goes out. It doesn't last, right? They also say, make sure you clean your machines frequently. Why? Because if you don't clean your machines frequently, then hydrogen gas is produced but does not get dissolved in the water. And we measured this. After a few weeks, those machines will have calcium depositions on the plates, and there's no more hydrogen gas dissolved in the water. So it's no longer therapeutic. And that actually is amazing, because that actually increases, in my mind, the credibility of the research in general. Because I have heard, before I even knew about all this area of hydrogen, I heard so many of these companies and these major distributors who are sharing water, thousands of gallons, all the time. And so many reports, people saying, I was drinking the water, I got all these benefits when I first got my machine, and then I kind of stopped getting the benefits. But then my neighbor got a machine, and I tried their water, and I get all these benefits. Well, now we know why. It's because they had a clean machine, they got hydrogen water, you stopped getting hydrogen water. As soon as they cleaned their machine, they got those benefits again.
Just gotta know.
It's all about the molecular hydrogen. Anyway, let's put those articles, and it also goes through some potential concerns about drinking very high pH alkaline ionized water as well, because there's some issues potentially with the microbiome, with potassium levels and other things that have been found in the research.
Yeah, I've never been attracted to alkaline water. I mean, it's gotta be multiple hundreds of millions of dollars of industry, smart, these alkaline water things, but there we go. We just killed it. We just killed the alkaline water industry, guys. Sorry, but don't drink it. Don't waste your money on that. But do look into hydrogen. I think it's worth your time.
It is interesting because they had all this testimonials and data coming out that alkaline ionized water was beneficial in the late 1990s, but there was no mechanism. So if you look at the actual publications, they're like, we don't really know why. They're trying to figure out why it was. And that's why the marketers started promoting things like, the alkaline pH. But the research never said that. In fact, the research would actually use the water and then neutralize the pH before doing cell culture research. So how could it be the alkaline pH?
Oh my God. So now we know.
Now we finally know it is the hydrogen water.
And we have better ways to make water that's richer in hydrogen.
Yeah, now we can focus and optimize on the molecular hydrogen instead of some enigmatic property that we can't even measure.
Exactly. Okay, I gotta ask you this one thing before we go. How old are you?
38.
You look younger than 38, man. Have you ever done any of these aging things?
I did a couple of them, and they all show about the same thing. I guess I don't know if I trust any of them.
Yeah, I know.
But I'm mid-20s or something.
There's hydrogen right there. And for both heart and soil and lineage, we're going to be infusing these with hydrogen. No, we can never do it. But I just think it's interesting. There's so much attention now to aging and longevity. I just have to point that out. That it's just correlation. Who knows? But you've been drinking hydrogen for years, and you're healthy. So thanks for living it.
Yeah, I train, exercise for about 3 hours every day. And
what do you do?
I'm a wannabe athlete, sort of.
In what?
Well, so I do a couple of things. So I do these. I do compete in these local races like 5K, half marathon, marathon stuff. So I try to win the local races on those, right? And then I'm also competing, and my new one is called Tower-thons.
I don't even know what this is.
You run to the top of skyscrapers.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. In the stairwells.
Yeah, the stairwells. Yeah, exactly. So. I actually looked at my time, my last competition, and I compared to the number one in the USA, and seconds,
You're
away.
close.
Yeah.
What?
So I'm like, okay, this is my thing. I ran. There was a stair race where I live, in St. George in Utah, and anyway, I took first on this stair race.
Wow.
Against elite level runners, what I consider elite. I mean, these are guys who are like Olympic qualifying times, for.
And you
the
beat all
marathon.
them.
Yeah, I beat them all.
Wow. Now the thing is stairwell, I've seen this like back in my vegan days, which was like 15 years ago. One of the guys I used to follow was into these things. Like you're like running past people in the stairwell.
Yeah.
Or is it just timing? It's one person at a time.
It's both. So they start you off like a 30-second bout. So you have your bib number, right?
And then you try to catch the guy in front of you.
That's kind of the idea. You try to catch the guy in front of you, but it's hard to do that, right? But then still the stairwell is wide enough that you can get around, but you can also hold on to the stairwell, so you kind of help yourself up. So it's kind of another technique that I'm learning to do, and it's good because the other sport that I do is I'm a wannabe arm wrestler.
Oh wow! Okay.
So I've competed in a number of competitions in that, and there's some correlation here because when you're arm wrestling, you want to pull into you. So you think like grabbing the handrail, and I'm kind of pulling myself in, and I'll be posting actually some of my training videos and things on my social media. So people who want to learn, because my background is exercise physiology as well. So I'm thinking about maybe doing some education about what I do for my health and fitness in these ways, how I train. And
what's your diet like?
So that's funny to have the conversation with you. Where you're at.
Are you plant-based?
No, well, I don't know if I like the term plant-based. But I just try to eat healthy and clean, which I know everybody says, but I want to make sure I get like a gram of protein per pound of body weight.
Okay.
Right, and I want to get that from primarily clean foods. Right, I want to get good meats. I like to have like good fish, for example.
Great.
To try to low mercury levels or something when I can do that. Because I do a lot of high intensity cardio, endurance-wise, I absolutely love my carbohydrates. If I were not trying to be elite level, then it's not so important or whatever, when you look at the research and things. But for me, like I want to get my carbohydrates. So I just really focus on proteins and getting my essential fats, right? And getting high enough there, and then the rest is like carbs.
How many carbohydrates do you eat a day?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't done the math on that because if I'm aiming for around 150 to 200 grams of protein a day, so this is pretty high at the protein, and then my fat is going to be around 25%, I'm guessing, of my calories.
That's actually kind of low, but okay.
Yeah. Probably it depends. It depends on how I'm getting my protein, right? Because sometimes it's going to be up to 40% or so. So I haven't done the whole macronutrients. I really feel pretty in tune with my body, like what I kind of need. Like sometimes I feel like, no, I don't need any carbs. Because all my cardio is fasted also. Like I'm 14, 16 hour fasted by the time I'm doing my cardio session as well. And so, but as soon as I'm done with my cardio, I eat my breakfast and I have 50 grams of protein and I have a bunch of carbohydrates because I have my weight training session later that afternoon. So I got to be fully recovered, get my glycogen replenished a bit so I can hit it hard in the gym later on.
Right. So you're doing aerobic and weight training
every day.
Every day. Wow.
Yeah, 7 days a week.
Wow. You don't take days off?
Well, on travel. When I'm on the plane.
It's built in.
Yeah, it's built in. Yeah.
Wow. Do you do hyperbarics?
No, I don't. And it's not that I don't have a lot of opportunities to do it, and I still have questions.
Sure.
About it in general.
Yeah.
But I'm not opposed to trying it and things.
And I mean, you're so intentional with these other things you're doing. This is, we tried to end the podcast and now we can't end it. We'll have to cut this into the front of the podcast before we do the outro. But what else are you doing in terms of biohacking or other things people might not know about in terms of, in addition to hydrogen? Anything else you're doing that's like interesting for people in terms of your protocols?
I try to be somewhat conservative in a lot of things I do because I feel like there are so many mechanisms that we can think of why something's going to be helpful for you, just like we talked about with the cold plunge. We can think all day why that's good for you,
right? But
it ends up not being so great for recovery and stuff, right? And the same thing with supplements and anti-inflammatories and antioxidants, right?
Right.
So there are some important supplements that I think are important, right? So like vitamin D, I want to make sure I have good levels of that, magnesium, some omega-3s, for example. So that I make sure I have supplementation in those areas, or I'm having a good diet or whatever, right? And then I think the most important thing is sleep. Really optimizing my sleep the best that I can. Turning the red lights on like at night time so that when I'm ready to hit the bed, I fall asleep immediately, right? And then getting up at the exact same time. Even if I go to bed at 3 in the morning, I'm still getting up, at 6:30 or something. Because
how often do you go to bed at 3 in the morning?
Sometimes I have work to do.
Really?
Or things, yeah.
Wow,
I was like,
okay.
but I don't like it. I mean, I've stayed up for 50 hours before.
Oh God.
Just working and doing things. When I was at the university, oh man, I had some serious times.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. I mean, you went through med school. You know how it is. But
yeah.
If I can avoid doing that, I would rather be in the bed for 8 hours a day and get at least 6 to 7 hours of sleep is kind of what I want to do. I got to recover. I train hard.
Yeah.
So I have to do that, get up, and then I want to be hitting my high intensity exercise within 30 to 45 minutes after I waking up.
First thing, okay.
And then I have a high cortisol spike. And man, I am ready to go. Like I don't have any coffee or anything like that. I don't need it, and I'm on point, and I'm ready to hit my hard workworkouts very quickly.
Eat after your first.
As soon as I'm done with my cardio session, I want to eat, and I want to replenish my glycogen. Your protein synthesis seems to be somewhat higher in the morning as well, and I just barely had like a 14-hour fast, and so I want to get my muscles and everything going. And so get that in there, and then for lunch, just whatever I need to have, and I try to eat more greens and things, and then I have a pretty big dinner. Most of my calories are actually in the dinner.
Okay.
Just my lifestyle and what tends to work well for me.
Cool.
But my weight training, and I train anywhere from 1 to 2 hours weight training. But it's not like all out after like circuit training. Like it's I'm a strength athlete. So I like to compete, and so when I'm doing a set, then I'll rest for like 3 to 5 minutes.
Right, between
sets, and I'm sometimes I'm reading or I'm working on something, or I'm doing things like
doing papers in the gym.
No, for sure. Like I mean, I've worked out for 6 hours before. Like I'll just go into the gym and I'll just like do my work and like, well, hit another set. I mean, it's just fun. I love working out. I love competing, and I love learning.
Feels good to move.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you so much, man. What a cool conversation. I appreciate all of your input, all the conversations we've had previous to this. Where can people find more about you and your work and follow your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So molecularhydrogeninstitute.org. Okay, we're a science-based nonprofit focused on advancing the research, education, and awareness of hydrogen as a medical gas. So there's no product promotion, endorsement, or affiliation or anything. It's just research, education. People can actually get certified through our MHI courses so they can learn the basic chemistry, like this redox chemistry we talked about. We've had people who are 8 to 80 years old get certified through this, and people just absolutely love it. So I would encourage people to do that, and that's how we're kind of funding our research and some of the things that we're doing. And then of course there's inhaleh2.com. That is the company that I consulted with, that I'm going to be the scientific officer of this company as well. So it's really exciting for me. So you can learn there, and then check out for social media. Well, the institute is just H2MHI on Instagram, and then my is Tyler W. LeBaron. And check me out. I'll post stuff on research and some of the other extracurricular activities that I'm involved in and stuff, and love to connect with people and help spread the word about this research.
Yeah, thanks for doing this work, man. It's really cool. But it's Molecular Hydrogen Institute, all spelled out. For the first one. Cool. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.